Chapter 509. Didn't General Liao say that after everything was settled, he would send a few bailiffs to investigate? Why are there so many soldiers here? My lord, this doesn't seem right. The bodyguard beside Lord Zhong panicked. Others might not understand what the dispatch of the cavalry meant, but as someone who had stayed in the military camp, he understood very well. Generally, when something big happened, the city-shaking army would dispatch the fastest cavalry to move out. Most importantly, why did they enter the city? And they were heading in their direction. Lord Zhong scolded. Fuck. Of course I know something is wrong. Why are you panicking? How could he not panic? So many soldiers appeared out of nowhere. Lord Zhong took a deep breath. His fingers were trembling. Let me ask you, has the old lady been killed? She should have been killed. Lord Zhong raised his eyebrows. Should have? A few people appeared out of nowhere in the alley. They were fighting fiercely. I didn't see everything, but looking at Commander Wang's posture, it shouldn't be a problem to catch the old lady. Go and inform Commander Wang and the others. Stop fighting and kill the old woman immediately. We have to retreat. That old lady Wang must not fall into the hands of others, or else if Wei found out, he would have something on them, then things would be bad. I'll go now. The bodyguard was about to fly away, but he saw that they were surrounded from behind. Lord Zhong stood up in a panic. He didn't have time to run and was drowned in the rising dust. General, we found an official here. Who cares who he is? Let's tie him up first. Jiang Liuyun had lost his rationality. From the moment he knew that young Master He was surrounded, he wanted to beat up anyone he saw. Lord Zhong finally saw the leader clearly. He was so scared that he almost fell to the ground. Jiang, Great General Jiang. Why is he here? What the hell happened? Even the city-shaking army was alarmed. Sweat trickled down Lord Zhong's forehead. He was afraid that Jiang Yunliu would really catch him. He raised his arms and shouted, General Jiang, it's me, it's me. Jiang Yunliu was currently in a fit of anger. He could not see the second young master. His eyes were bloodshot. Who are you? I am Zhong Xin, the one who follows General Liao and manages the provincial capital's finance. Lord Zhong tried his best to get close to Jiang Yunliu and carefully avoided those blades. Jiang Yunliu responded with an "oh," but his expression was somewhat unfriendly. What are you doing here? A rank 6 official hiding at the entrance of an alley and cowering in fear. One look and one could tell that there was a problem. I came out for a walk. Lord Zhong faked a smile as he stretched his arms. When Jiang Liuyun saw that his eyes kept drifting towards the entrance of the alley, his eyes darkened. Since Lord Zhong is in such a leisurely mood to take a stroll, then follow this general to the alley in front to have a good stroll. The alley in front. Wasn't that the alley that the assassins had blocked? Lord Zhong's expression changed when he heard this. He tried his best to maintain the smile on his face. General Jiang, that alley is very narrow and difficult to walk through. It won't be easy for the general to enter with so many soldiers. There were so many alleys in the provincial capital. Why did he have to choose that one? Lord Zhong was very anxious. If he didn't handle this well, he would definitely make a big mess this time. He had to think of a way to lure General Jiang away. Narrow alley? Old Jiang, like to walk in narrow alleys. After saying this, Jiang Liuyun didn't waste any more words with Lord Zhong. He waved his hand and ordered the cavalryman to bring him onto the horse as well. In less than 3 minutes, Zhong Xin had come up with a plan. Since General Jiang insisted on going through that alley, Zhong Xin would not hesitate. When the time came, he would push the blame of old Lady Wang's death onto the few people who were causing trouble. At the same time, he would also give the assassins a reason to send out their troops. Thinking of this, Lord Zhong was relieved and decided to take one step at a time. However, Jiang Liuyun didn't have the mood to care about him at all. He was as irritable as a lion. Only when he saw He Eyes at the entrance of the straw hut did he let out a sigh of relief. It's good that he's fine. He Eyes also saw Jiang Liuyun and threw away the iron rod in his hand, full of dominance. Only then did Jiang Liuyun notice that his sleeves were stained with blood and immediately dismounted from the horse. But before he could say anything, Lord Zhong got up from the horse and pointed at He Eyes with righteous indignation. You murderer! Murderer? He eyes laughed coldly. Who are you calling a murderer? Don't tell me these people were sent by you. As he spoke, He eyes stretched out his long legs and kicked Commander Wang on the ground. The coldness in his eyes was enough to freeze the atmosphere in the alley. Lord Zhong was a civil official after all, so he was very uncomfortable riding a horse. After hearing He Ai's words, he finally understood the situation in front of him. How was this possible? Lord Zhong looked at Commander Wang's swollen face in disbelief. Then, he looked at the assassins lying on the ground and the corners of his eyes twitched violently. These were the most elite soldiers in the Liao army. How could they be beaten up like this? Second brother, be gentler, don't scare our Lord Zhong silly. Hellion Vivian pushed the last person aside and walked out from the dark corner, her right hand still holding her submachine gun. If Lord Zhong was shocked a moment ago, he was now completely dazed. He retreated step by step, his eyes shaking violently. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. You. How did this Wei guy appear here? And he was dressed like that. What was he holding in his hand? Wasn't he a weak scholar? How could he be so good at fighting? Lord Zhong was already speechless. He could only look at Jiang Liuyun behind him. He wanted Jiang Liuyun to reveal something to him. Jiang Liuyun was only worried about He Ai's injuries. Young master, your arm. Injured. He Ai's only gave him 2 words in a sloppy manner. Damn it. I know it's injured. Didn't I want to know where you are injured? If it's serious, let's quickly treat it. Don't come back to the military camp and give me a good beating. Jiang Liuyun's attitude was very obvious. He was treating He Ai's like a master. When Zhong Xin heard this, the blood on his face was completely gone. What kind of person could make General Jiang, who was famous in the entire military camp, be so respectful? He didn't even dare to think about the background of this handsome man in front of him. What made his neck feel cold was that just a moment ago, he pointed at him and said, "He is a murderer." And why was this Wei guy so familiar with this person? Chapter 510. One question after another made Zhong Xin's heart beat like a drum. He had no choice but to put on a humble attitude. While wiping the cold sweat on his forehead, he wanted to interrupt. "General Jiang, who is this young master? Didn't you just say that I'm a murderer?" When He Ai's raised his eyebrows, he was not angry, but he could make people feel cold all over. Zhong Xin smiled embarrassedly. This is all a misunderstanding, all a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? He Ai's stepped on Commander Wang's hand on the ground again. He looked up at Zhong Xin. "You dare say that these people surrounding me have nothing to do with you?" Commander Wang fainted from the pain just now. Now that he saw Zhong Xin's face, his first reaction was to take revenge. "Sir Zhong, go and inform General Liao immediately. Ask him to send troops and cripple all these people who don't know their place." Zhong Xin heard Commander Wang's words and wanted to strangle him to death. Why didn't this person take a good look? General Jiang was standing beside him too. Jiang Liuyun smiled coldly and pinched Commander Wang's chin. "I was wondering who it was. So it's Commander Wang. You're really capable. Of all people to cripple, you want to cripple the second young master." Second young master? After Commander Wang saw Jiang Liuyun, he looked at He Ai's face again and was shocked. You? Jiang Liuyun smiled. "Why, didn't General Liao always say that he admires old Master He the most? Now that old Master He's beloved grandson is standing in front of you, you can't recognize him? Old Master He's beloved grandson?" When these words popped out, Commander Wang knew that he was done for. What kind of family was the He family, and what kind of status did the young master of the He family have? He was practically the crown prince of the military camp. Not to mention him, even if General Liao came personally, he would have to obediently kowtow a few times when he saw this person. As for him, he actually surrounded him and beat him up for a long time in the alley. Although he was the one who was beaten up in the end, but no matter what, he had still injured this crown prince. Commander Wang felt his vision turning black. He really wanted to chop off his own hands. This time, they really hit a metal plate. Even if the gods came, they would not be able to save their lives. Zhong Xin was a local civil official after all. He could not figure it out and asked blankly, "Old Master He? Who is it?" The old He family of Sijio City, the old Master He who leads the 4 armies and assists the late emperor. Jiang Liuyun's voice was not loud, but it was loud enough for the surrounding soldiers to hear clearly. Boom! Blood rushed to Zhongshin's head in an instant. The He family in the capital. This. If old Master He knew about this, even with General Liao's protection, it would be useless. Who was Old Man He? They were the founding fathers of the nation who could make the military camp tremble with fear with a stomp of their feet. They were capable of governing the country with their intelligence and maintaining order with their martial prowess. They were the founding fathers that the current era relied heavily on. Looking at young Master He, even if old Master He didn't show up, the soldiers here could trample him to death. For a moment, Zhongshin felt that there was no way out. He sat on the ground, paralyzed. Looking at Helian Vivian's face, he murmured, "If his young Master He, then what about you? Who are you?" He had just heard Wei call young Master He second brother. Could it be that he was also from the He family? Me. Helian Vivian curled her lips into a smile, each word was clear to the bone. The 89th generation descendant of the Helian Vivian family, Helian Vivian. Helian, Wei. Zhongshin felt that he was almost out of breath. Isn't that the current 3rd princess consort? How could this be? Whether it was him or General Liao, they had always thought that Wei was just a poor scholar who came from a small place. Now, this person actually told him she was the current 3rd princess consort. Compared to the pain in his face, the only thing that Zhongshin could feel was unprecedented fear. If she was the 3rd princess consort, then, the private advisor Long who followed her around, Zhongshin's vision turned black as he thought of this. When he fainted, he finally realized that this time, they really couldn't escape. If they didn't put private advisor Long in prison, they might still have a chance to live. However, they had made the most unwise move in the game of chess. At this moment, in the prison, Liao Qingtian stared coldly at Bailey Jiuju. "You're asking for it. You're asking for it. Lock him up with the iron chains. Afternoon, bring him to the Yamen and bring along those forged confessions. When the time comes, in front of the retired emperor, this general will ruthlessly peel off a layer of that Wei's skin." "Yes, General." The warden nodded and bowed as he followed behind Liao Qingtian. "General Liao, in my opinion, this person is asking for a beating. If we beat him for a day, he won't be able to take it anymore and listen to General Liao." Liao Qingtian snorted coldly. "Do you think that I haven't thought of this? But now that the retired emperor is here, his eyes are very sharp. If he sees that the prisoner is injured, he'll definitely think of torture to get a confession. Then, I'll be asking for trouble. It's better to just go like this. When the time comes, you'll be the only one who can insist that this confession was personally drawn by him. Then, this brat and that Wei guy will be finished. General Liao, you're really far-sighted." The warden gave a thumbs up to flatter Liao Qingtian. Liao Qingtian was always proud and did not express any more opinions. He felt relieved as the matter was almost settled. Although there was no reply from Zhongshin. However, according to the usual practice, no news was the best news. This was because Zhongshin would bring Commander Wang and the rest to have a good time every time after completing a mission. It was almost time. He would ask a few Yamen runners to go there later and that would be the end of the mission. It was normal for an old man in his 60s to fall to his death, no one would notice. Undeniably, Liao Qingtian had planned everything too smoothly. He thought that if the Yamen runners in the provincial capital did not come out, Helian Vivian would not have any soldiers to use. On the contrary, Helian Vivian was cleaning up the mess. "Phut, Lord Zhong won't wake up after he fainted." He eyes laughed evilly. Helian Vivian raised her eyebrows. "It's good that he won't wake up, so he won't have the thought of leaking information." Jiang Liuyun did not know the twists and turns in this matter. He paused and pointed at the dozens of people who were killed by Helian Vivian and the rest, asking, "What should we do with this group of people?" "Bring them back to the Yamen," Helian Vivian said meaningfully. "These are all evidence, not a single one of them can be missing." "Me too, the wound on my hand is also evidence." He eyes suddenly licked his lips and smiled. Jiang Liuyun touched the bridge of his nose. It was said that whenever the second young master of the He family smiled like that, it meant that someone was going to suffer. Of all the people to ambush, he chose to ambush this one and offended the third princess consort. Undeniably, this Liao Qingtian was really fearless of death. Chapter 511. Hellion Vivian knew that Liao Qingtian would not send assassins to block the alley for no reason. There must be someone or something in the alley that he wanted to eliminate as soon as possible. After subduing the group of people, Hellion Vivian turned around and asked Hei's second brother, "Why did they come here just now?" "I think it should be for that old lady." Hei's paused and pointed at the blind old lady. "They have always wanted to kill her." Hellion Vivian followed his finger and saw an old lady leaning against the wall under the door. Her white hair was messy and her expression was bitter, which made people feel sorry for her. "It's Liao again. It's him again. Guanyin Bodhisattva, if you can really show up, please help me, this old lady. As long as Liao Qingtian can receive the punishment he deserves, I'm willing to do anything." Hellion Vivian listened to the old lady's crying. She took a step forward and put down the gown in her hand. Then, she squatted beside the old lady's feet. "Old lady, would you like to go to the Yamen with me?" "Yamen?" When old Madame Wang heard these two words, it was as if she had heard a scourge. She shrank back and smiled bitterly. "What's so good about that place? It's just a place where the rich and powerful are more reasonable." After listening to old Madame Wang's words, Hellion Wei pondered for a while and said, "Old Madam, I'm the newly appointed magistrate and I'm currently investigating the Bayview seafood restaurant incident. I know that Liao Qingtian is the mastermind behind everything. If you really have any grievances, please follow me back to the Yamen. Don't worry, I'll give you justice." Bayview restaurant. Can you really touch the Bayview restaurant? Old Lady Wang grabbed randomly, as if she wanted Hellion Vivian to give her an affirmation. Without the slightest hesitation, Hellion Wei held her hand. "I promise." "That's good." Old Lady Wang lowered her voice. No one could tell her background. "I'll go with you now." Hei's laughed at the side. "Grandma, you trust her so much. Aren't you afraid that she'll sell you out?" Old Lady Wang shook her head and said with a smile in her voice, "Young man, although my eyes are blind, my heart is not blind. You guys made such a big commotion just now. You were the only one who held on for so long because you were protecting this old woman. Since you want to investigate the Bayview seafood restaurant, no matter what the result is, I will follow you and fight for it since you saved me today." Hearing that, Hei's and Hellion Vivian looked at each other, their eyes filled with admiration for Granny Wang. Such an upright and plain-spoken old man. Most worthy of respect. Bang! After a round of drumming, the door of the Yamen opened wide. The bailiffs held wooden staffs and lined up on both sides, shouting, "Wei! Woo!" This trial was different from all the previous ones. It was not because of anything else, but because the person sitting at the side listening to the interrogation had a great background. Previously, most of the officials did not know that the retired emperor was here. They only received the news that Elder Hellion was going to attend the interrogation. Now that they saw the retired emperor sitting at the hearing table without moving, many of them felt weak in their legs. They wanted to go over, but they were stopped by the retired emperor's gaze. Eunuch Sun opened his mouth. "Everyone, please take a seat. It's almost time. The interrogation is more important. The old emperor doesn't have so many rules when he's outside." His meaning was very clear. He wanted them to dispense with the etiquette. Elder Hellion chuckled at the side and mediated, "Since Eunuch Sun has said so, let's take a seat." Yes. The other officials did not dare to have any other opinions. They sat down one after another, but their bodies were stiff. They did not dare to touch the tea in front of them. Liao Qingtian came relatively late, so he was still in the area of the interrogation. The one who was late was Hellion Vivian. She was still on her way. Liao Qingtian felt that this was an opportunity. He glanced at Lord Shu who was sitting beside him. Both of them exchanged glances. Lord Shu understood and shook his head. He said with a tone of disappointment, "Lord Wei, it's fine if you don't pay attention to official matters, but you're so careless today." His voice was not loud, but he purposely let the people around the retired emperor hear him. Elder Helion stroked his white beard and sipped a mouthful of hot tea. The retired emperor did not have any expression. He was so wise that no one could tell whether he was happy or angry. The people below were used to it. Naturally, they did not expect the retired emperor to do anything to Wei Liao with just one sentence. It was mainly because the retired emperor listened to them. The retired emperor would more or less have a bad impression of Wei Liao. Next, it would be easier to talk about the case. Liao Qingtian's calculation was good. Eunuch Sun raised his eyebrows and felt even more comfortable. It seemed that they had achieved their goal. Ha, Wei, ha, Wei, you asked for it. As an official of the imperial court, he's so undisciplined. This Lil Wei is too young after all. Liao Qi stood at the side and listened to Liao Qingtian. He clenched his fist tightly. If it was not because imperial grandfather said that he was not allowed to beat people in the yamen or he would not give him meat buns, he would have punched him. This Liao guy, how dare he talk bad about third sister-in-law? He deserves a beating. Speaking of which, why did he not see third brother until now? As long as third brother was here, he could beat people up as he wished. Third brother said that he should beat back anyone who was bullied. The retired emperor knew that his little grandson was about to explode. He raised his hand and gave the little one a meat bun. He then patted his bald head. When he looked at Liao Qingtian again, there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. Liao Qingtian did not know that he had unknowingly offended the retired emperor again. He held the teacup in his hand and smiled. If Lord Wei doesn't come, I didn't expect General Liao to miss me so much. A clear voice was heard from the crowd outside the yamen. The people spontaneously made a path. Helion Vivian walked over slowly with a smile at the corner of her mouth. Her long robe was slightly fluttering. She still looked very plain. The only difference was that she was wearing half a mask when she appeared this time. Elder Helion frowned. Was it an illusion? Why did he feel that this Lord Wei in front of him looked a little familiar? Since Lord Wei is here, let's start the trial quickly. We have wasted a lot of time waiting for you. Liao Qingtian purposely made it sound so serious to provoke Helion Vivian. He thought that since this Lil Wei came from a small place, he must have never met the retired emperor. If his emotions were unstable, he would definitely speak without thinking. By then, the retired emperor would hate him. Chapter 512. How could Helion Vivian not see through his thoughts? She smiled mockingly. Before the trial, I would like to ask General Liao a few things. What is it? Liao Qingtian did not care. He thought to himself, no matter what you ask, I have my ways to deal with you. Helion Vivian looked at him sharply. The first thing is, who gave General Liao the right to release Magistrate Liao and the other felons of the Imperial Court? Felons of the Imperial Court? Liao Qingtian smiled and said, I've seen the case that Lord Wei tried. Your so-called evidence was just fabricated by the private advisor who followed you. Later on, it was also verified by a few other lords. We all think that it can't be considered as evidence. As soon as Liao Qingtian finished his sentence, another official took over. General Liao is right. Lord Wei, you shouldn't always think about arresting people. Sometimes, you should check if you missed anything during the trial. So, according to the lords, even if Lord Chen was present and arrested them, it can't prove that Magistrate Liao is guilty. Helion Wei leisurely said, Lord Chen was personally appointed by the retired emperor as the governor of the 3 provinces. His task is to investigate corrupt officials. Now, even a 3-year-old child knows to avoid relatives during the trial. However, General Liao took the initiative to release Magistrate Liao. Are you looking down on Lord Chen? Or are you looking down on the retired emperor? Lord Wei, you can't talk nonsense in front of the court, Liao Qingtian warned her with a deep voice. Helion Vivian just smiled. General Liao, please don't be angry. I just asked one thing. Why are you so angry? Lord Wei, you think too much. I'm not angry, I'm just reminding you what you should say and what you shouldn't say. Liao Qingtian clenched his fists under his long sleeves, but his voice was very calm. Helion Vivian did not fall for his trick at all. The second thing is that the people from Bayview Seafood Restaurant dared to remove the seal right after the yamen was sealed. However, General Liao acted as if he did not even see it. He even hosted a banquet for his younger brother, Magistrate Liao, to entertain all the officials. General Liao, I'm not well educated. Don't tell me you don't know what the seal of the Yamen means. Regarding this matter, I would like to ask Lord Wei a question. You have closed down the Bayview Seafood Restaurant without any reason before the investigation is done. Do you know how bad of an impact your actions will have on the provincial capital? Liao Qingtian said indignantly, that's a century-old shop in our provincial capital. Many merchants come here for the Bayview Seafood Restaurant's seafood. Now that you've messed with it, the provincial capital will lose a lot of money. Helian Vivian raised her eyebrows. General Liao is really eloquent. However, since General Liao mentioned the merchant's investment, I've done some simple statistics. Since 4 years ago, no merchants from other provinces have come to invest in the provincial capital. The statistics are 0. I really can't see how my actions of shutting down the Bayview Seafood Restaurant will have a bad impact on the provincial capital. If we were to talk about what really affects the merchant's influence on the provincial capital, it should be the Bayview Seafood Restaurant's exorbitant price. Upon hearing this, Liao Qingtian narrowed his eyes and laughed. It seems like Lord Wei's prejudice against the Bayview Seafood Restaurant is too big. Who in the provincial capital doesn't know that the Bayview Seafood Restaurant is good at cheap prices? The crabs and prawns are the freshest. It's not good for Lord Wei to spread rumors about the Bayview Seafood Restaurant in front of so many people. As soon as Liao Qingtian's words left his mouth, it caused a huge commotion. That's right. How can an official tarnish the reputation of the Bayview Seafood Restaurant? Go and ask around. Which provincial capital doesn't praise our Bayview Seafood Restaurant for its high-quality food? Isn't a prefectural magistrate afraid of provoking the public's anger by doing this? Someone shouted desperately in the crowd. His voice was so loud that it didn't seem real. Liao Qingtian stroked his beard. Lord Wei, you heard it too. These are the public's inner thoughts. You're a parental official. Sometimes, you can't judge a case recklessly just because you're prejudiced. Upon hearing this, Helian Vivian lowered her eyes. Liao Qingtian thought that she was afraid. Just as the corner of his mouth lifted into a complacent smile. Bang! The sound of a drum was heard. A handsome man walked in from outside the Yamen unhurriedly and said, I want to sue Liao Qingtian. It was just a few words, but it caused chaos in the entire Yamen, both inside and outside. The officials looked at each other in dismay. Only the retired emperor, who was drinking tea, looked meaningfully at the man's face. A ray of light flashed across his eyes. Heh, the kid from the He family is here too. I really didn't expect this. What is this girl Wei up to? The retired emperor, who wanted to stand up for Helian Vivian, was now sitting steadily. On the other side, Liao Qingtian came back to his senses. He frowned slightly. Young man, did you get something wrong? I, Liao Qingtian, have never done anything wrong to the public. You know what you've done. Let me tell you, you're the one I want to punish. Heija smiled evilly. It was infuriating. Liao Qingtian had never met anyone who dared to talk to him like this. He was really courting death. Liao Qingtian scoffed and said loudly, where did this unruly citizen come from? How dare he slander me? Guards! Drag him away and flog him 50 times. General Liao. Jiang Liuyun walked in immediately when he heard that he wanted to flog the second young master. What crime did my young master commit? Why do you want to flog him 50 times? Liao Qingtian seemed to have lost his voice instantly. He looked at Jiang Liuyun's face slowly and asked stiffly, young master? Old Master Hei's grandson. Jiang Liuyun only gave him one sentence. Liao Qingtian could no longer sit still, but he did not have the time to do anything. The retired emperor took a sip of tea and asked calmly, young Hei, what are you accusing Liao Qingtian of? He used his position to mobilize the city defense army to kill people in the city in broad daylight. Heija pointed at his arm, my wound is the evidence. Liao Qingtian's body shuddered and the color on his face changed. How could this happen? He had sent someone to kill old Madame Wang. How could he hurt young Master He by accident? Most importantly, why would the young master of the He family appear in such a place? Was he just passing by? Liao Qingtian felt that something must have gone wrong. Now that he thought about it carefully, it had been a long time. Even if Commander Wang and the rest were going to indulge in debauchery, Zhongxin should have come back with news. However, the reality was that Zhongxin seemed to have gone missing. He could not be found anywhere. His intuition told him that something was not right. Chapter 513. Young Master He, there must be some misunderstanding here. After Liao Qingtian came to his senses, the first thing he did was to clear his name. I've been running between the Yarman and Bayview Seafood Restaurant for the past 2 days. How could I possibly send someone to do such an outrageous thing? Did someone slander me? How would they dare to kill young Master He in broad daylight? Even if I was given 100 guts, I wouldn't dare to order anyone to do such a thing. Liao Qingtian appeared to be very angry. Undeniably, this was a good move. When he paused, he did not forget to pull Hellion Vivian along. Lord Wei, someone is causing trouble, why don't you do anything about it? The Imperial Court has given you quite a lot of salary. How is the Yarman doing its job? Indeed, under normal circumstances. When such a thing happened in the provincial capital, the person who should bear the main responsibility would be the local magistrate. Liao Qingtian's accusation was not wrong. That was why he was so daring. From the beginning, he had already prepared to not let any Yarman runners interfere in this matter. Without the Yarman runners, it would be difficult for Wei to take action even if he received any news. If this matter was brought up, he could only blame it on a moment of carelessness. However, the magistrate with the surname Wei would not be able to escape the blame. However, Liao Qingtian did not expect that He Ziyi would be hurt unintentionally. It was better this way, the bigger the matter. The punishment for Wei Ziyi would be greater. Liao Qingtian had a good plan. Naturally, there would be people who responded to his words. After listening to his words, the officials sitting at the side more or less understood what he meant. They looked at Hellion Vivian. Lord Wei, young Master He is so badly injured. Why didn't the Yarman send a Yarman runner to check on him? That's not right. That's right, that's right. The salary given to the Yarman by the Imperial Court is not for nothing. If they can't even maintain law and order, what's the use of setting up a Yarman? The voices of the crusade swept toward Hellion Vivian like a tide. Liao Qingtian did not expect He to know Hellion Vivian, so he took the opportunity to clear his name. Young Master He, you heard what the adult said. Although I'm in charge of the city guards, I can't control anything that happens in the city. If I know that young Master He has come to the provincial capital, I'll definitely send someone to protect you. General Liao's words sound better than a song. Hellion Vivian chuckled softly, her tone indifferent. Liao Qingtian looked solemn. Lord Wei, please don't always slander me. I still have the same question, why didn't you send the Yarman runners to deal with the troublemakers? Lord Wei, how can you be a magistrate to this extent? Liao Qingtian was certain that Hellion Vivian did not have anyone he could send to manage her. That was why he was so insistent on this issue. However, what he didn't expect was that after Hellion Wei heard his question, her lips curved into a smile as she leisurely replied, who said I didn't care? You managed it. Liao Qingtian's tone was filled with disbelief. That was impossible. The Yarman runners were under his command. Without his command, the Yarman runners would never leave the Yarman. How could this Wei person manage it? Hellion Vivian looked at Liao Qingtian with a faint smile. General Liao, you seem to be surprised that I managed it. Why? Do you mean that you don't want me to manage it? I'm just asking you. Liao Qingtian narrowed his eyes. Hellion Vivian smirked. General Liao has been asking me why I didn't send the Yarman runners to save them. The reason is simple, I can't mobilize the Yarman runners. What a joke, I'm the magistrate, but no one in the Yarman listens to me. General Liao, you're the one who always listens to me. If I ask them to go east, they will definitely not go west. General Liao is really loyal to the people in the provincial capital. Liao Qingtian's expression changed when he heard Hellion Vivian's words. He looked at the retired emperor's direction subconsciously. When he saw the retired emperor frowning, he immediately shouted with a guilty conscience, Lord Wei, I'm just trying to reason with you. Why do you keep slandering me? You said that you managed it, But why did young Master He suffer such a serious injury? Do you think that the lords here don't have the ability to analyze the situation? In the end, he did not believe that this Wei person had the ability to deal with his assassins. As expected, Hellion Vivian stopped talking when he asked this question. Liao Qingtian was getting more and more proud. Lord Wei, some things are right in front of you, yet you insist on distorting the truth. Even your accusation against Bayview Restaurant is the same. It's completely unreasonable. Are you done? He Eyes, who had been quiet all this while, walked out slowly. His eyes were filled with mockery. This is my first time seeing such a shameless person like you. To tell you the truth, if it wasn't for Lord Wei's appearance, I'm afraid I would have died in the alley. His words were like a slap to Liao Qingtian's face. His proud smile froze at the corner of his mouth at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Liao Qingtian's tone changed. His forehead was filled with sweat. Hey, so that's how it is. Lord Wei didn't explain it clearly just now. I've misunderstood. However, he really couldn't figure out where Wei had found this person. General Liao, don't you think you're dreaming if you're trying to shirk all responsibility by saying that it's a misunderstanding? Hellion Vivian looked at him coldly. Liao Qingtian did not know what to say at that moment. He stiffened his scalp and met the retired emperor's probing gaze. His limbs were in a mess. Lord Wei. Elder Hellion spoke at the right time. There's no need to make things difficult for others. After all, young Master He met with an accident in the provincial capital. The Yamen should be responsible for the safety in the city. Finally, you can't hold it in anymore? Hellion Vivian smirked. Her little face that was hidden under half of the mask was filled with mischief. With Elder Hellion's support, Liao Qingtian regained his righteous expression. Elder is right. Lord Wei, you've asked me so many questions. I'd like to ask you, is it because my brother pointed out your crime of corruption when you were in Fuping? Corruption? Hellion Vivian looked at him mockingly. General Liao, do you think everyone here is a fool? How do I look like a corrupt person when I'm dressed like this? Liao Qingtian sneered. You can't tell anything by looking at the clothes. Some people can't judge a book by its cover. This general didn't want to conclude the case so quickly when it was still under investigation, but Lord Wei has tried to frame me time and time again. He even pinned the matter of young Master He's injury on me. I am truly wronged, so I have no choice but to take out the evidence. Men, hand over the criminal's written evidence to the Lord. Chapter 514. A receipt signed by a criminal? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Someone presented a roll of paper to the hall. Every official looked at it and finally it fell into Elder Hellion's hands. He looked very serious and shook his head while looking at Hellion Vivian, as if he was saying that she was hopeless. Liao Qingtian straightened his sleeves and said loudly, the receipt that all of you have seen just now was written by the private advisor who followed Lord Wei into office. It is written clearly on the paper about what Lord Wei has been doing ever since he took office. He used the excuse of farming and drought relief to allocate funds, but in the end, he did not implement it and so on. This is a whole 100 taels of silver. Lord Wei is really daring. The officials whispered as they pointed at Hellion Wei and whispered among themselves. Hei's hands clenched tightly. If it was not for Hellion Vivian's hand on his wrist, he would have kicked the villain with the surname Liao and told everyone who she was. She was one of the two heroes of profound heaven. Why would she need your 1 million taels? Corruption, my ass. Also, who the hell is that private advisor? Why didn't I hear that there was a private advisor by Wei's side? Didn't she come from the royal family with that black-bellied person who would eat people without spitting out their bones? Wait a minute. Hei's suddenly looked sideways at Hellion Vivian's side profile. Could it be that the private advisor who had signed and admitted his guilt was the royal family? Great. Not to mention the Liao family, the entire power of the provincial capital would be uprooted. He had to admit that this villain Liao had played too big this time and directly played with his own life. After thinking about this, not only did Hei's anger dissipate, but he also curled his thin lips playfully. His long and narrow eyes lit up, as if he was ready to watch a good show. The retired emperor frowned and was about to speak. Then, Hellion Wei said calmly, General Liao, I know my own private advisor best. He would never admit to this kind of thing, let alone sign on that piece of paper of yours. Is Lord Wei unwilling to confess? Liao Qingtian's tone was slightly arrogant. Lord Wei, do you dare to deny that you did not simply arrest anyone because of a guilty conscience when you were in Fuping County? Did my nephew offend you? You even locked him up. Liao Qingtian's words were meant for Elder Helion. Elder Helion had always doted on his nephew. After hearing Liao Qingtian's words, he squinted his shrewd eyes and said, "It seems that Master Wei's character is indeed questionable." Hearing this, Xiao Qi's tiger eyes were about to burst into flames. His little face was overbearing, but he still stood there calmly. He believed that third sister-in-law would not be bullied by these people. But why hadn't third brother appeared yet? The retired emperor was also thinking about this. After all, according to the previous situation, the third prince would definitely not let Wei be looked down upon here. Where did he go? Liao Qingtian did not know what was on the retired emperor's mind. Seeing that he was deep in thought, he thought that what he did had worked. He immediately seized the opportunity and said, "You abused your authority, committed corruption, violated the law, arrested people without reason, and now you want to destroy a decade-old shop in the provincial capital. Lord Wei, did you not think of the consequences when you did these things?" "General Liao," Helion Vivian said slowly, "before you criticize me, I suggest that you read more of the files. Master Liao was arrested because he gave false testimony in the imperial court. Shouldn't such a person be arrested? Also, Elder Yun, you said that my character is questionable. As your nephew, how do you judge Master Liao's behavior of violating the imperial court's constitution?" Elder Helion did not expect the other party to react so quickly. Every sentence was like a needle hidden in a needle. However, he was someone who had seen the big picture after all. He would not panic just because of Helion Vivian's words. Compared to General Liao's thoughts, Elder Helion's thoughts were clearer. General Liao has already mentioned this problem just now. All the evidence that day was provided by the private advisor beside you. Now that he has confessed, it means that Liao Kai's words were not false. Lord Wei, the private advisor beside you is indeed a capable person. He did everything flawlessly. However, justice has a wide net, and he still showed some flaws. Now that he has confessed, you won't be able to clear your name no matter what you say. According to what Elder Helion said, even the private advisor beside me is a criminal. Helion Vivian curled her thin lips and looked straight at Elder Helion. Elder Helion spoke in a righteous manner, "You know best whether it's true or not. I know your tricks very well. Two people working together to make money, what kind of place do you think the provincial capital is? You dare to be so lawless under the imperial city? Do you not want to live anymore?" As soon as he finished speaking, the voices of the officials were heard. It's because of the existence of such parents and officials that the people misunderstand us so deeply, and that private advisor, he's not a good person either. Fortunately, General Liao is a righteous person and insisted on protecting the Bayview seafood restaurant in the provincial capital. Otherwise, it would have been ruined by this Wei fellow. When it was time to show their loyalty, the officials would not be left behind. Among them, there were a few who did not speak. Their words carried little weight, and they could not help Helion Vivian much. To be honest, they felt that it was a pity. Some of them even wanted to ask for Governor Chen on behalf of Helion Vivian. However, on second thought, things had already come to this point. Since Elder Helion had come personally, he had all the evidence he needed. Although those who knew the inside story knew that the signature was definitely fake, Elder Helion had no choice. What else could they do? How could they explain to the retired emperor? Once they were implicated, Elder Helion would be fine, and they would be the unlucky ones in the end. Just like that, Helion Vivian became the target of everyone's disdain. Right at this moment, old Lady Wang, who was hiding in the crowd, stepped out. Her voice was old but powerful. "Who said that Lord Wei is wrong? I've been in the provincial capital for 5 years, and this is the first time I've met a good official who dares to go against you. Liao Qingtian, you bastard, how dare you say that Bayview Seafood Restaurant is the provincial capital's pride? Why don't you say that you're selling dog meat with sheep's head?" Not only did you cheat people, but you also used dead seafood to cook. My grandson died in the provincial capital because he ate your prawns. Not only did you not give us an explanation, but you also found someone to rape my daughter-in-law because of this incident, which harmed my son. In the end, I'm the only one left, and you even poisoned me until I'm blind. Just so that I won't be able to leave the provincial capital and sue the emperor. Liao Qingtian. God is watching everything that people do. Do you think that everything will be fine after you've covered up everything? I want you to pay for my family's lives now. Chapter 5:15. As old lady Wang spoke, she stretched out her hands and pounced towards Liao Qingtian like a madwoman. Liao Qingtian panicked when he saw old lady Wang. He immediately scolded the Yamen runners beside him. What are all of you doing? Why did you let a crazy woman in? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and chase her out. Yes, yes. The Yamen runners wanted to drag old lady Wang away. With her strength, she would definitely drag old lady Wang away with just one hand. Hellion Vivian did not say anything. She lifted her leg and gave them a hard kick. Let's see who dares to move. Her aura was probably too strong. Other than the Yamen runner who was lying on the ground, the rest of them took a step back in fear. Liao Qingtian shouted loudly, Lord Wei, do you know what you're doing? How dare you use violence in court? General Liao, I think you're the one who used violence first. Hellion Vivian's eyes were as cold as ice. Liao Qingtian saw that Hellion Vivian insisted on protecting old lady Wang. He shifted his gaze and said cunningly, Lord Wei, what you did is too immoral. You even sold a witness just to frame me. Liao Qingtian, you're bullshitting. How dare you say that you don't know me? Old lady Wang was so angry that her body was trembling. Liao Qingtian looked at her mockingly. I really don't know if you're really crazy or not. Why would a general like me know you? You said that you don't know me. The people who came to my house and tried to kill me were all sent by you. If it wasn't for Lord Wei's help, my old life would have been ruined. How dare you say that you don't know me? Old lady Wang thought that it would be effective if she said that. At least, it would make Liao Qingtian feel guilty. However, Liao Qingtian did not admit it at all when he was not faced with such accusations. Someone tried to harm you, so just say that it was me who sent them. Granny, you should have some conscience. You'll be punished if you give false testimony in court. You. Old lady Wang gasped for breath. She never thought that there would be such a shameless person in this world. Hellion Vivian pressed her hand on old lady Wang's back to help her catch her breath. Then, she calmly responded to Liao Qingtian's mockery, General Liao, you keep saying that it's not you. You're really good at shirking your responsibility. What do you mean by shirking responsibility? Liao Qingtian did not bother about old lady Wang. He only looked at Hellion Vivian and said, Lord Wei, I really admire your scheming. But black is black, white is white. Under the eyes of so many people, if you want to slander this general, you have to consider how many people will believe you. You're the one who should admit your guilt. What else do you have to say in the face of such a conclusive confession? Since just now, General Liao has been using your fabricated confession to talk about this. I'd like to ask, where is the person who wrote the confession? Why don't you ask my advisor to come out so that we can verify the truth face to face? Hellion Vivian smiled slowly as she said this. There was an inexplicable meaning in that smile. Yuan Ming and Xiao Bai, who were hiding in the fantasy space, looked at each other. This woman is going to use her ultimate move. Liao Qingtian did not say anything. Elder Hellion, who was Liao Qingtian's advisor, had expected that Wei would confront the advisor face to face. That was why he had arranged everything beforehand. There was someone who knew how to cast a spell in the army. As long as the spell was placed on someone else, that person's mind would be taken away and he would only listen to his command. Now, Advisor Long was deeply affected by the spell. If he was asked to come out, Wei would only die more miserably. That was his ultimate goal. No matter how smart Wei was, he would never have thought that he would have such a trick up his sleeve. Inviting him into the trap. Originally, the best way was to kill him. Only then would there be no mistakes. However, it would inevitably arouse the suspicion of the retired emperor. That was why he came up with such a plan. Now that this Wei fellow had brought it up, he would not hold back anymore. It seems like Lord Wei won't give up until we invite Advisor Long to the court. General Liao, there's no need to talk to him anymore. Some people are just like that, they will only be honest after they hit the wall. Elder Helion waved his hand and gave Liao Qingtian a look to calm him down. He then said in a deep voice, "Someone, bring Private Advisor Long here. Let Lord Wei have a proper confrontation with him. Let's see his personal signed confession." Yes. The Yamen runners accepted the order and left. Elder Helion did not forget to ask the retired emperor who was sitting beside him, "Old Master Huang, do you think this is appropriate? Let's wait until the advisor is here." The retired emperor gave an ambiguous answer. He was different from He Ziyi and Xiao Qi. He did not know who the advisor was. He thought that his ice-cold grandson was probably hiding somewhere at the moment, so he didn't care about the matter of the Grand Master. Liao Qingtian wanted to show off in front of the retired emperor, so he listed all of Belegaju's shortcomings. This advisor Long is very arrogant and scheming. He does not follow the right path and only wants to earn money. He has tarnished the reputation of the scholars. You're tarnishing the reputation of the scholars, your whole family is tarnishing the reputation of the scholars. Xiao Qi held back his anger so much that he opened his mouth and took a bite of the meat bun. He was wondering why third brother was missing. It turned out that he was locked up by this group of people. He swore that when third brother came out later, his imperial grandfather would definitely make this group of people kneel down and call for their mothers. When He Ziyi heard this, the expression on his face became more and more ruminating. He lowered his voice and whispered by the side of Wei's ear. "No wonder you didn't let me speak all along. So it turns out that you were holding back a big move. Did you and Third Prince already plan beforehand to give this group of people a big bomb? Those who are unjust are doomed to destruction. We didn't know that Liao Qingtian would be so daring in the beginning. He even dared to capture the advisor by my side and fabricated so many fake evidence. Now that the situation has come to this, I can only say that he won't die if he doesn't seek his own death. Of course, His Highness must have cooperated to a certain extent." Helion Vivian stroked her chin and thought, "No, it should be said that His Highness cooperated most of the time, which led to this outcome. That was why it was said that one should never provoke His Highness. TSK, 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 such a scheming move, whoever provoked him would be unlucky." However, Liao Qingtian and Elder Helion, who were unaware of all these, were still immersed in their flawless plan. They thought that this would definitely make Helion Vivian suffer a huge setback. Both of them looked at each other. All of their evil plans were hidden in the corner of their eyes. Liao Qingtian's lips curled into a complacent smile. He was just waiting to see Wei dig his own grave and never be able to make a comeback. Chapter 516. Elder Helion was also sitting leisurely. To be honest, ever since Wei locked up his nephew and cut off his huge allocation in Fuping County, he had been thinking of killing him one day. Initially, he planned to deal with him when he arrived at the capital city. It would be easier for him to do so then. He did not expect that someone from such a small place would be more reckless than he thought. Since that was the case, he would get rid of him completely in the provincial capital, including Private Advisor Long, who was following him. Elder Helion laughed. He held his teacup and took a sip of the hot tea. Just as everyone was getting restless from waiting, a voice suddenly rang out. In the distance, a figure gradually approached. From the Yamen, one could only see his long, slender, and powerful legs. His perfect figure was outlined by his white robe. His black hair was as soft as the night, falling behind him. He looked like a demon that had transcended the mortal world. At that moment, the people thought that they were looking at a god who had descended from all over the world. Then, the crowd slowly parted. The man who was wearing a bracelet casually walked through the door. His snow-white robe and black hair fluttered in the wind. His long and narrow almond-shaped eyes had a hidden light. It was not hurtful, but it had the aura of being in control of the situation. When he was silent, the slightly drooping corners of his eyes dispelled the coldness perfectly, showing the nobility of being immersed in power all year round. This is. The teacup in Elder Helion's hand made a clattering sound. His eyes widened at that moment. He could not be bothered anymore and stood up abruptly. The many officials who did not understand the situation looked at Elder Hellion from the side and looked at each other in confusion. What happened? I don't know. I guess Elder Hellion has never seen a private advisor with such an appearance. I was also surprised when I saw this Long for the first time. Liao Qingtian did not care about Elder Hellion's reaction. He asked directly, Long San, Lord Wei did not admit your confession. What do you have to say? The reason why Liao Qingtian was so unscrupulous was because of the existence of the human venom. According to the predetermined answer, this Long San should repeat all the crimes written in the previous confession, and then this Wei person would be completely convicted. However, just as he finished his question, Elder Hellion abnormally bellowed before the other party could reply, General Liao. Elder. Liao Qingtian did not understand what he meant. Elder Hellion said hurriedly, this is. But before he could finish his sentence, Bailey Jiaoju interrupted him indifferently, I have never written any testimony. When Liao Qingtian heard this, he thought that the stimulation from the human venom was not enough, so he shouted angrily, Long San, even now, you're still so stubborn. Don't force me to torture you. How are you going to torture me? Or is it a dish? The corners of Belegaju's mouth slightly curled up, and he said in a devilishly cold and wanton manner, do you think that kind of little thing will be of any use to me? At the side, the retired emperor frowned. This Liao guy was too unreasonable. Not only did he kidnap his grandson, but he also wanted to use a cup on the third prince. Good, very good. Let him have a good look at what it means to be a local tyrant. At the thought of this, the retired emperor laughed coldly, and his eyes were filled with layers of coldness. Of course, Eunuch Sun knew that his master was protective of his grandson. When he saw the royal being chained, he was so shocked that he almost jumped up. Earlier, when Belegaju stepped into the door, Elder Hellion was already sweating and feeling weak. Now that he heard Liao Qingtian's words, he could not wait to find a hole and bury himself in it. He had expected to see a bearded, unkempt private advisor with a bad family background. But he did not expect that the other party would be a royal. How could this be? Since when did the royal become a private advisor? He should have thought of it earlier. Long San, the third prince of the Long family. With such a prominent name, he could only blame himself for not thinking in that direction. But now, Elder Hellion's left leg went soft, and he leaned against the back of the chair, as if he had aged more than 10 years. What should he do? What should he do? Merely imprisoning the prince was already a serious crime that would implicate his entire family. They even fabricated a testimony to accuse him of being a thief who embezzled the imperial court's funds. At the thought of this, cold sweat trickled down Elder Hellion's face, and he no longer had the arrogance from before. There was only one thought in his mind now, and that was that he was done for. He was completely done for. Liao Qingtian did not know what happened, and thought that Elder Hellion had such a big reaction because he also realized that the human venom had lost its effect. After all, he was also flustered just now. But soon, he calmed down. So what if the human venom was gone? As long as he was ruthless enough, he could beat Private Advisor Long until he told him the answer he wanted. It seems that Private Advisor Long has forgotten everything after waking up, Liao Qingtian sneered. Belegaju spoke slowly. How can I remember things that have never happened? Things that have never happened? Since you are so stubborn, I don't mind helping you recall. As he spoke, Liao Qingtian waved his sleeves. Someone, beat him up. Give him 100 beatings. Stop when he remembers the testimony that he wrote yesterday. Liao Qingtian was used to flaunting his authority in the provincial capital, and it was difficult for him to restrain himself. Moreover, he was following the usual trial procedures, and there was nothing that others could find fault with. However, what he didn't expect was that the retired emperor, who hadn't said much since the beginning, opened his mouth unhurriedly. His voice was faint but penetrating enough. General Liao, what did my grandson do wrong? Why do you want to give him 100 beatings? What does this mean? Liao Qingtian turned his head around slowly. There was a moment when he thought that there was something wrong with his ears. Son? The officials were dumbfounded as well. They stared blankly at Belegaju's handsome face, and their faces showed an extremely dull expression. Did his grandson mean that the private advisor Long who was standing in front of them was the current prince? After thinking about it carefully, there was only one prince who followed the retired emperor and was loved by him, other than the seventh prince. That was the third prince. Boom! Liao Qingtian tripped and fell to the ground. What did he do? He actually put the War Dragon Empire's most difficult to provoke His Highness into the dungeon, and even threatened him at least 3 times. He was dead meat. This time, even the King of Hell could not save him. Chapter 5:17. Liao Qingtian sat paralyzed with an ugly expression. Even his lips were pale. Every single thing he did was like a slap to his own face. He was the heir apparent of the War Dragon Empire. Not to mention the allocation of funds, even the future of the entire War Dragon Empire belonged to him. How was it possible for him to be corrupt? Liao Qingtian, who had never been afraid on the battlefield, could not help but tremble when he realized this. The first thing he did when he came back to his senses was to support himself with both hands on the ground. Bang! 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 He kowtowed loudly. I have made a mistake. I have eyes but failed to see. I have offended the third prince. I beg the retired emperor to show mercy and spare my life on account of my military exploit. Liao Qingtian was still holding on. He was hoping that the retired emperor would consider the overall situation and spare his life. However, he had forgotten that the person he was facing was not the retired emperor, but the third prince of the War Dragon Empire who could do whatever he wanted. Beligaju looked at him from a superior position. His eyes were indifferent. You can kill people for the profit of Bayview Restaurant just because you have military exploits? Liao Qingtian, who gave you this right? His voice had always been cold. It was the kind of coldness that seeped into one's bones. Liao Qingtian did not give up and tried to defend himself. I didn't kill anyone. Someone is slandering me. Bayview Restaurant is a little expensive, but I don't think there will be a situation where one would die from eating it. As he spoke, he raised his head. His forehead was full of blood. He hurriedly said, Retired Emperor, you should also know that the Marine Soldier Tower's seafood is the freshest. There won't be any problems at all. You're lying. The little seventh prince walked over with his short legs and his bald head. His face was full of vigor as he said, When I went to Bayview Seafood Restaurant to eat, I even ate dead prawns. Liao Qingtian was dumbfounded when he heard this. Since when did the seventh prince eat dead prawns in Bayview Restaurant? That was impossible. He had specifically instructed the staff at Bayview Seafood Restaurant to serve the best and freshest seafood on the table whenever they saw someone of high status. Ever since the seventh prince made a scene in Bayview Restaurant. Basically, everyone knew who the seventh prince was. How could anyone dare to serve him dead prawns? Unless he had been to the provincial capital a long time ago. All of a sudden, Liao Qingtian seemed to have recalled something. On the first day of Wei's appointment, he said that he had eaten at Bayview Seafood Restaurant. He even used this as an excuse to ask for the restaurant to be closed down. Could it be that the seventh prince had already been to Bayview Seafood Restaurant at that time? Liao Qingtian could not help but feel a chill down his spine. If that was the case, did it not mean that the other party had planned everything from the beginning? As it turned out, he was the turtle that didn't know what was good for him. Thinking of this, Liao Qingtian's face turned even paler. The retired emperor continued to speak calmly. Liao Qingtian, do you know why I came to the provincial capital? It's all because little Seven had a meal at your Bayview Seafood Restaurant. That child complained of a stomachache the moment he returned to the palace. How dare you quibble here? A dignified city protector general, not only did he not uphold justice for the people, he even risked his life for others. In the face of the old man's accusation, you are so shameless that it makes one's hair stand on end. You still have the face to mention your military exploits to this emperor. Pa. The retired emperor fiercely threw the teacup in his hand onto the ground. Guards! Drag this evil general who harmed the people and took bribes and perverted the law away and behead him immediately. I'd like to see who dares to be lawless in the future just because of his military exploits. Bang! Liao Qingtian's legs turned to jelly. The rest of the officials were also drenched in cold sweat because of the retired emperor's last sentence. They had never thought that the private advisor Long whom they had accused was actually the third prince. What should they do now? The officials who were listening to the interrogation could not even lift the teacup in their hands as they trembled all over. Especially when they heard the heavy sound of a knife falling on the ground from outside the yamen, their hands trembled and the teacup fell onto the wooden table. Beligaju glanced at them slowly. Those officials immediately straightened their backs and smiled stiffly. They rubbed their hands together and revealed an awkward look. They flattered, "You are indeed the royal family. You exposed Liao Qingtian's true identity with just a few words. If it wasn't for your highness' timely appearance, we would have thought that Liao Qingtian was a good general who served the people and the country. Now it seems that we were all fooled by him. This Liao Qingtian is really vicious." Who said he wasn't? One may know a person's face but not his heart. That bastard Liao Qingtian is really good at acting. Your highness is really capable. Just like that, in order to prove their innocence, more and more officials changed sides at the last minute. Hellion Vivian looked at these hypocritical officials and smiled. "All of you are really interesting. Just now you were still helping Liao Qingtian and insisting that private advisor and I are corrupt officials and our crimes are unforgivable. Now you are accusing Liao Qingtian and saying that he deserves to die. Your judgment criteria is really simple. It is decided based on one's status. The higher one's status is, the more true his words are." What she said was really a slap in the face. Most of the officials' faces turned into the color of pig liver, so red that it was almost purple. Elder Hellion, who saw this, vaguely understood something. It was precisely because he understood that he sat so uneasily. If it was just to deal with Liao Qingtian, the third prince only needed to reveal his identity when he was caught. Why did he have to wait until now? Was he waiting for the retired emperor to come, or was he waiting for him to come? Elder Hallion's fingers trembled as he felt a fear that he had never felt before. He was too clear about the royals' means and practices. Things were not as simple as that. If one were to ask him what he regretted the most now, it was that he was too greedy to come to the provincial capital. If he knew that the royal was here, he would not come even if he was given a mountain of gold and silver. It was just a small case. It was not worth paying attention to at all. He had personally investigated the identity of the person with the surname Wei. It was very clean and simple, there was nothing special about it, but who would have thought that such a small official would be followed by a prince? Regret swept through Elder Hallion's body like a tidal wave. But fortunately, he had not completely fallen into it. Liao Qingtian was the one who did everything. He could totally say that he was deceived by Liao Qingtian and accused the royal just like the other officials. At most, he would be punished for not being strict enough and not knowing the truth. The retired emperor would definitely not give him a heavy sentence because of this matter. Thinking of this, Elder Hellion relaxed his expression and tried his best to make himself look calm. Only in this way, he would be cleared of suspicion. Chapter 518. At this moment, Boss Lee of Bayview Restaurant, who was standing in the crowd, wanted to run as soon as he noticed that the situation was not right. However, before he could take a step forward, a shadow loomed over his head. It was Da Xiong. He was so tall and sturdy that he could easily lift an ordinary person up. Boss Lee was surprised to see such a huge figure. Da Xiong grabbed Boss Lee's collar with one hand and pulled him up like a cabbage to Beligaju. Da Xiong then threw him on the ground and said loudly, "Your Highness, this guy has been sneaking around outside for a long time. You asked me to keep an eye on the crowd, and I noticed that something was wrong with him. Besides, he was the one who spoke up for Bayview Restaurant and slandered Master Wei." Boss Lee did not dare to raise his head at all. He could only cover his face with his hands. Hellion Vivian walked over and laughed mockingly. "Isn't this Boss Lee? Master Wei, please spare my life." The man with the surname Lee was also a sly one. Once he realized that Hellion Wei had recognized him, he quickly started to deny himself. "I'm just a figurehead boss of Bayview Seafood Restaurant. I can't control the actual situation and can't make decisions. The real owner of this restaurant is Liao Qingtian." He did not expose Elder Hellion, but he paused at this point. This was the part of a businessman who was smart. He would not take things too far. Since Elder Hellion was still sitting there, of course, he would not expose him. Hellion Vivian knew that he did not finish his sentence. In her previous life, other than fighting, the thing she was best at was interrogating these cunning criminals. When she saw Boss Li's eyes drifting back and forth, she knew that there was something going on. Boss Li, are you trying to push all the blame onto a dead person after seeing that Liao Qingtian was beheaded? How can there be such a good thing in this world? You better tell me something. Otherwise, you can go with Liao Qingtian and be his companion. No. I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. Boss Li lowered his eyes and broke out in cold sweat. However, he did not forget to look around. It was Magistrate Liao's idea to open this restaurant in the beginning. He said that it was easy to take advantage of foreigners and that they would not dare to say anything even if we took advantage of them. That was why we set the price so high. After that, Bayview Seafood Restaurant became famous and Magistrate Liao said that there was no need to be afraid of them anymore. At that time, I was still hesitating whether there would be any problems, but Magistrate Liao's beloved son, young Master Liao, said that even the Yamen was run by his family, so what could possibly go wrong? After Elder Hellion heard this, he could not sit still anymore. After all, Xiao Yu was different from Liao Qingtian. He was his nephew. Bailey Jiaoju saw everything and curled his lips wickedly. Then, ask Master Liao to come to the Yamen. Oh right, bring Magistrate Liao along too, so that he can accompany Liao Qingtian on his journey. Hellion Vivian listened to Beligaju's words. She quietly moved closer to him and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Your last sentence." "Yes. I'm imitating you." His Highness admitted it so quickly that it made Hellion Vivian feel embarrassed. She could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth. Beligaju looked at the annoying head in front of him and the faint smile on his face became more obvious. Hellion Vivian was 100% sure that His Highness was toying with her again. What kind of hobby is that? Forget it, who asked her to be a bossy CEO? Which bossy CEO in novels was not abused by their other half all the time? Compared to those who would cry and say, I don't want it, His Highness was much better. Hellion Vivian was very satisfied and looked at Beligaju with appreciation. He-Eyes, who was standing beside her, saw the interaction between the two and reached out his hand to touch his chin. Before Magistrate Liao and Master Liao arrived, he secretly pulled Hellion Vivian. What's going on between you and the royal? What do you mean what's going on? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and then said righteously, don't you know? I told you before that as a bossy CEO, you have to accommodate your other half. This is a matter of principle. It's also a standard. Hearing this, He-Eye's expression froze. After a long time, he finally found his voice and said slowly, so, until now, you still think of yourself as the overbearing CEO and the third prince as the one being pursued? After saying this, He-Eyes had the illusion that he was choking on his saliva. How long has it been? Didn't the royal already read His Highness' book, XX Ways to Chase Your Wife? Why didn't he stop her from having such thoughts? Hellion Vivian looked at He-Eyes strangely. I was the one who pursued him. He-Eyes roared in his heart. Is this the key? The key is why you regard yourself as a bossy CEO. Haven't you noticed that bossy CEOs are all men? He-Eyes took a deep breath and was about to say something when he saw His Highness' long and narrow eyes casually glancing at him. The depths of his eyes were full of warning. All of a sudden, he was stuck. He looked up at the sky. Then he looked at his little sister, who was originally very smart but was now a little silly and cute. He reached out and patted Hellion Vivian's shoulder. You can just think of it as that. It's good. Poor silly girl. In the end, the cunning His Highness probably wouldn't let anyone tell her what the key point of this mystery was. Beligaju stared at his movements for a while, then said to Hellion Vivian, come here. His voice was very deep, and when he lowered it, it was even more deep and magnetic. Hellion Vivian didn't suspect anything and leaned towards him. He immediately took her hand. The two of them were originally standing very close to each other. In the ancient clothes, the sleeves were very long, so no one would notice when their fingers were interlocked. The tip of her nose was filled with his fragrant lotus scent, in addition to the slightly cool touch of his hand, Wei only felt comfortable. She lifted her small face and faced him with a silly smile. Beligaju was stunned. His indifferent eyes immediately softened, as deep as the stars in the midnight sky. In the entire Yamen, only he eyes could see the expressions and movements of these two people. He was sad inside. Hey, can you restrain yourself a little? When will that magistrate Liao and young master Liao come? Regardless of whether they are guilty or not, hurry and interrupt these two people first. However, young master Liao, who was still indulging in wine and women, didn't know what happened. He was still eating the grapes fed by the head of the brothel when two men in black came in, saying that the Yamen wanted to see him. Only then did Master Liao remember that today was Wei's unlucky day. Perhaps his uncle would need him to accuse Wei. Therefore, he did not inquire about anything and swaggered into the Yamen with the shadow guards. Chapter 519. Master Liao's walking posture was still as arrogant as ever. In addition, he was not very intelligent. He was just a spoiled brat who relied on the protection of his ancestors. He could not tell what was going on. Every time he entered and left the Yamen, he was very casual. In addition, his uncle, who loved him the most, was sitting at the top, so he had nothing to worry about. When he saw Beligaju's expression, he immediately said, "Why is this private advisor released?" "Uncle, he bullied me the most in the past. He has no manners at all and only knows how to slander others." "You." Elder Hellion did not manage to say the word "shut up." The retired emperor, who was sitting at the side, calmly interrupted him. "Oh? Why is he slandering others? When we were in Fuping County, he made a lot of fake evidence and slandered me. If that's not slandering others, then what is?" Master Liao said while shaking his legs, "I know he dares to be so presumptuous because he has the support of the Chen family. Otherwise, how could he be qualified to arrest me? He's just an insignificant private advisor, yet he knows how to rely on others to show off. I've seen too many people like him. They rely on their faces to make themselves look decent, but in fact, they are very poor." Elder Hellion could not hold it in anymore. He stood up with a loud bang. The retired emperor only took a sip of tea and said with a cold gaze, "Sit down and listen to your nephew." Elder Hellion could not help but clench his teeth. He knew what the retired emperor meant. He was not allowed to interrupt. He did not think much of Xiao Yu's words in the past. He only had one nephew. Of course, he had to pamper him, but now, he couldn't wait to give him a tight slap to shut him up. He was simply a brainless pig. Was he so stupid that he could not even see the situation now? No matter how turbulent Elder Hallion's heart was, the arrogance that Master Liao had cultivated since he was young had long made him develop the habit of thinking that he was the biggest boss in the world. He didn't know the identity of the person sitting next to his uncle. He also didn't hear what the retired emperor said just now. He thought that the person was just a new official from the provincial capital that he hadn't seen before, so he didn't take him too seriously. Seeing him like this, Hellion Vivian curled her lips and said, "According to what you said, did we convict you or wrongly accuse you? You know very well whether I was wronged or not." Master Liao looked at Hellion Vivian with disdain. "Wei, I didn't want to argue with you at first, but you kept coming up to me and asking for a slap in the face. You're always thinking of punishing me, but in the end, this young master was still released. Instead, I'm afraid that your Grand Master will have to squat inside after the interrogation. Let me tell you, this is the difference. Don't forget that you always act like you're so cool. Who do you think you are? You're just a stupid scholar from a small place." Speaking of this, he turned around and looked at Elder Hellion. "Uncle, this Wei guy isn't fit to be an official at all. When he was in Fuping County, he hooked up with a village girl and tried his best to stand up for her. For the sake of that village girl, he asked his Grand Master to accuse me of perjury and locked me and my father up. You must punish him. Shut up." This time, Elder Hellion finally shouted out the words that he wanted to say. However, his expression had also turned extremely ugly. After shouting, the first thing he did was to apologize to the retired emperor who was next to him. He, who didn't sweat all this time, finally understood what it meant to have weak legs. "Old Emperor, it's this old official's fault. This old official didn't teach my subordinates well. However, this child, Xiao Yu, really doesn't have any intention of harming others. It's just that he's really good at hiding things when he speaks. This old official begs you to be magnanimous and forgive this child this once. Furthermore, Xiao Yu wasn't completely bluffing. According to this old official's information, Lord Wei was indeed very close to a local village girl when he was in Fuping County. It's hard not to be suspicious. Elder Helion said this in an attempt to divert the retired emperor's attention. However, it was this sentence that made him completely fall for it. Helion Wei opened her mouth unhurriedly. Elder Helion's meaning is that I'm the one who should be punished, while Elder's nephew is merely a little insensible, nothing more. Child. Elder Helion, you've really made it sound nice. Young Master Liao is almost in his 20s this year, right? How can you call him a child? A giant baby? As soon as she finished speaking, the entire Yamen burst into laughter. No matter how stupid young Master Liao was, he could hear the mockery in Helion Vivian's words. His flat face flushed red, and he was so angry that his chest heaved up and down. Wei, who are you calling a giant baby? It's obvious that I'm talking about you. Helion Vivian looked at him with pity. You can't even understand such obvious words. Indeed, you're like a giant baby. It's not the size, it's the IQ. You. Young Master Liao pointed at her. Elder Helion was afraid that he would say something outrageous again, so he took the initiative to speak. Lord Wei, you've made this old one even more suspicious after saying so much. If you're not related to that village girl, why are you so agitated? I'm not agitated, Elder Helion. This is the second time you've slandered me today. I think it's time for me to prove my innocence, Helion Vivian said while handsomely removing the half-mask on her face. A familiar face instantly entered Elder Helion's eyes. How could it be her? Elder Helion took a heavy step back and sat back down on the wooden chair in a dispirited manner. His expression was as if he had seen a ghost. His face was 10 times worse than when he saw Beligaju. At this moment, he realized what a fatal mistake he had made. The other officials had never been to the capital, so they did not understand why Elder Helion suddenly became like this. However, they were all very smart and knew how to observe people's expressions. Looking at Elder Helion's expression, they knew that there must be some unforeseen circumstances, otherwise, he wouldn't be like this. Could it be that this Lord Wei also has another identity? Before the officials could figure it out, Helion Vivian laughed softly. Elder Yun, it's been a long time. You didn't attend the headquarters last time. This time, we met in the provincial capital. I'd like to ask Elder Yun, what do you think I have to do with another girl? This rhetorical question made Elder Helion feel a burning sensation on his face. He wished he could find a hole in the ground and bury himself in it. Chapter 520. This is all a misunderstanding. Elder Helion did not expect it to be her. He was stuttering. Not only him, but all the stewards in the capital city thought she was in the imperial palace at the moment and was at her wits' end because of her status. No one would have thought that she would disguise herself as a man and go to Fuping to become a county magistrate. No wonder the royal family would become a private advisor. It was all because of her. Elder Helion finally understood everything, but it was too late. However, Master Liao was still clueless about the situation. He tugged at Elder Helion's sleeve and said, "Uncle, why are you being so polite to her? She's just a county magistrate." "Shut up. I'll say it one more time. Shut up." Elder Helion's demeanor was completely gone as he bellowed furiously. Master Liao, who had never been so fierce before, was stunned. He did not understand where he had gone wrong. Elder Helion took a deep breath. When he met Helion Vivian's eyes, he had no choice but to flatter her. "It's my fault that I didn't recognize Eldest Miss." Eldest Miss? Wasn't that the legendary successor of the Helion family, Helion Vivian? It was said that she was once a good-for-nothing who was despised by everyone and did not have any martial chi. However, half a year ago, she suddenly rose up and returned to the Helion family. She defeated her father in one fell swoop and became the new clan leader of the Helion family. She was married to the royal family and became the Princess Consort. She was a winner in life. Her talent in making martial arts could be said to be a genius among geniuses. Everyone in the Dragon War Empire knew about the profound heavens that she founded. The officials did not expect that the Bayview seafood restaurant that they had blocked and ridiculed countless times would have such a background. Once again, the officials felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts. Their lips turned pale and they did not know what to do. No matter how stupid Master Liao was, he knew what the words eldest miss meant. Although he had never been to the Hellion family, he had always been aware of the recent happenings in the Hellion family. The young lady of the Hellion family, Hellion Vivian, was the current princess consort. He actually said that something would happen between the princess consort and a village girl. What could happen to two women? When Master Liao thought of this, he fell to his knees with a thud. He reached out his hand and tried to pull on the corner of Hellion Vivian's robe. Miss, uncle is right. This is all a misunderstanding. If I had known your identity, I wouldn't have. You wouldn't have bumped into me and made me apologize to you, right? Hellion Vivian said flatly, you won't keep saying how poor my advisor is, right? Hearing Hellion Vivian's last sentence, Master Liao's face turned completely pale. He thought about what he had just said. How he wished he could slap himself. However, the black-bellied His Highness added, it's a pity that I'm not poor. I think young Master Liao still doesn't know my identity. Your uncle only found out today, so I'll share it with you so that you can die a happier death. Guards, take him away. Master Liao was dumbfounded. His face was full of snot and tears. He no longer had the arrogant look he had just now. He was in an extremely sorry state. Then, there was a heart-wrenching cry. Uncle, save me, save me. All the officials understood what it meant to take him away. It meant that he would most likely die. Elder Hellion wanted to plead for mercy for his nephew, but he was afraid that he would be implicated. He could only watch helplessly as Master Liao was taken away with bloodshot eyes. He clenched his fists tightly. When he thought of the plan that the three elders in the capital city mentioned, a murderous look appeared in his eyes. Xiao Yu, you should leave. Uncle will avenge you. When we return to the palace, Uncle will make this Hellion Vivian die a horrible death. The three people from the Liao family were all killed in just one afternoon. Magistrate Liao was the last one to be brought in. When he saw Elder Hellion's expression, he knew that everything was over. However, he still thought that there was some leeway. In fact, there was no leeway in front of the royal family. His methods were too ruthless. Every layer of thought was so meticulous that it was frightening. Like a hunting snake, he made people fall into the trap step by step and then swallowed them whole. The death of the three people from the Liao family made the Yamen fall into silence. At the same time, it also made every official breathe a sigh of relief. Since the person was already dead, this case was definitely over. This was good too. They would not dig deeper. Otherwise, there were not many people sitting here who were truly clean. The officials looked at each other and were secretly happy that they had escaped a disaster. They had to admit that they had underestimated His Highness. Since His Highness wanted to kill them all, how could he stop here? Bailey Jiaoju sat directly on General Liao's seat with his slender legs slightly crossed. He looked noble and elegant, and his expression was indifferent. I have a list of names here as well. I'm sure all of you will be very interested after reading it. Someone wanted to take the opportunity to flatter and said with a smile, the things that His Highness gives are usually good things. It is indeed a good thing. Beligaju curved his thin lips devilishly. However, when the list was placed in front of them, the few officials from the provincial capital could no longer smile. His legs turned to jelly and he fell to the ground. He did not care about his image as he shouted, Your Highness, these are all baseless rumors. We are all innocent. It was all Liao Qingtian's doing, Your Highness. Unfounded matters. Bailey Jiaoju laughed, but it was not warm at all. Instead, it was chilling like a shadow. You know very well what you did outside the Bayview seafood restaurant on the day Magistrate Liao was released. Shadow, ask all the lords to open their eyes wide and take a good look at the amount of silvers written on the list. Ask them where the silvers went. If they can answer, spare their lives. If they can't, kill them. Beligaju said casually. However, the officials trembled when they heard the word kill. Someone could not control himself and shouted, "Your Highness, I will confess everything. It's my fault for taking the money, but we have to do this. It's not easy for us to be local officials. We have to pay our respects to the higher-ups every year. Sometimes, the salary given by the imperial court is not enough. Moreover, the Liao family is the tyrant in the provincial capital. We can only side with them." Bayview Seafood Restaurant may seem to be the property of the Liao family, but in fact, the one who is controlling the whole situation is Elder Hellion, who is sitting on your left. Clang. Chapter 521. In an instant, the atmosphere in the Yamen froze. The officials did not expect that someone would expose Elder Hellion. When Elder Hellion heard his name, he clenched the handle of the chair under his palm. He tried his best to make himself look like he did not care about what that person said. This was because he knew clearly. At this point, even if someone were to accuse him, it would not have much effect if there was no conclusive evidence. However, if he panicked at this moment, everything would be over. Compared to him, the retired emperor was calmer. It was as if whatever he heard did not have much of an effect on this wise and far-sighted emperor. He casually tilted his head and asked, "What does Elder Yun want to say?" "Retired emperor, ever since I became an elder, this is not the only time I have been slandered. Now that the family is so big, I can't control what my subordinates do." Elder Hellion said slowly, "Some people don't have the ability to distinguish. When they hear my name, they blindly believe it. This has created many opportunities for some lawbreakers. Now that this has happened, it is inevitable that some people will suspect me. After all, the Liao family is related to me. Therefore, I would like to ask this lord, do you have any evidence to prove that I am in charge of the operation of Bayview Seafood Restaurant?" Upon hearing this, that person anxiously looked at his colleagues who were kneeling beside him. Those people shook their heads at him. They all knew that Elder Hellion was clearly asking the obvious. Back then, everything was discussed at the dining table. There was no specific written agreement. Even the silver taels distributed by the Bayview Seafood Restaurant had reached Elder Hellion's hands through other means. Unless someone could get hold of the accounts of the Bayview Seafood Restaurant and the Yamen immediately, they might be able to find out the missing silver taels. However, the silver taels had been divided up in an unseen way. It was impossible for them to take it out immediately. "You have nothing to say, right?" Elder Hellion sneered. "I knew this would be the result." Speaking of this, he turned his head and looked at Beligaju. "Your Highness, I will admit to what I have done. It is indeed my fault that I am unable to discipline my subordinates. However, this old man is not someone who would harm the common people for money. This old man doesn't know the rules of the Ministry of Personnel, but if you want to accuse me of doing bad things, you should at least provide evidence. This lord doesn't have any evidence at all, yet is already slandering this old man. This has already negatively affected this old man's reputation. I hope that your Highness will give this old man justice." When the man heard this, he suddenly became agitated. "You're lying. Your Highness. Don't listen to him. He was lying. I'm telling the truth. Back then, when I came to the provincial capital, I also wanted to be a good official. But later, because I knew that the roots of the provincial capital were too deep and I couldn't afford to offend them, I had no choice but to wallow in the mire with them. Elder Hellion even promised us personally at Bayview Seafood Restaurant that as long as we don't reveal the secret of Bayview Seafood Restaurant, our future official career will be smooth sailing. My lord, this old man has to say that you've really put in a lot of effort to get yourself out of this crime." Elder Hellion glanced at the group of people around him. "If what you said is true, that this old man had once warned all of you at Bayview Seafood Restaurant, why is there only one person who is testifying against me now?" That person looked to the left and right again, then said to his colleague on the left, "Lord Lee, say something. You were there at that time, weren't you?" I. That person surnamed Lee's eyes drifted. When he saw Elder Hellion's face, he shifted his gaze to the side. "Lord Zhong, could it be that you remembered wrongly? Elder Hellion did come that day, but I drank too much and forgot about it." "I don't think Elder Hellion said anything. That official surnamed Zhong was dumbfounded. You clearly responded at that time. How could you have drunk too much? I really don't remember. Officer Li lowered his head. Elder Halian's smile became colder. He said confidently, Lord Zhong, this old man isn't close to you, and we have no grudges against each other. Yet, you want to frame me like this. Others have already said that it's not the case, but you still insist on forcing others to give false testimony with you. A despicable person like you would be doing a good deed for the people if you die. You. Officer Zhong didn't care about what Elder Helion said. He just grabbed Officer Li's collar and said, why don't you tell the truth? Why? We've already come to this point. Anyway, we can't live anymore. Why don't we just drag down the people who are harming us? Just like what Officer Zhong said, he did want to be a good official. But sometimes, he couldn't help it and fell deeper and deeper. Now, he wanted to do the right thing before he died, but he realized that it was still so difficult. This was because the influence of the aristocratic families on the officials was too great. It had reached a certain level. Officer Li raised his head and looked at him. There was a lot of apology in his eyes. But in order to save his life, he could only say this. He really wanted to persuade Officer Zhong to think carefully. There was a reason why everyone didn't say anything. If it was just a crime of corruption, they would at most be sentenced to exile at the border. But if they offended Elder Helion, they couldn't produce solid evidence. In the end, it was very likely that the other party would be fine, and they would directly lose their lives. It was clear at a glance which result was lighter. All the officials knelt on the ground one after another. Obviously, any one of them could stand up and testify for Officer Zhong. But no one was willing to provoke the fire. Elder Helion was very satisfied with their obedience. Of course, there were also disobedient ones. Elder Helion opened his eyes coldly. That's enough, Officer Zhong. This act will go too far. Officer Zhong clenched his fists and slammed them on the ground. Elder Helion laughed mockingly in his heart, but on the surface, he was wronged. Your Highness, it's up to you. Beligaju met his gaze and narrowed his long and narrow eyes slightly. Elder Helion didn't retreat at all. He knew this man's methods, but so what if he only had methods? He didn't understand the people's hearts and the officialdom. He still couldn't do anything to him. Beligaju looked at him for a full 3 seconds, then said calmly, Ying, put Officer Zhong in prison. I will interrogate him later. Yes. Ying respectfully accepted the order. Elder Helion curled his thin lips and glanced at Officer Zhong with a complacent look. Officer Zhong was completely dispirited. The others were thinking, as expected. Fortunately, they weren't as stupid as Officer Zhong, jumping out to accuse Elder He. However, Beligaju's next sentence made everyone's expression change. He said, he doesn't have evidence, but I do. Chapter 522. That's impossible. Elder Halien's body trembled. But he discovered that Bailey Jiaoju was looking down at him, the corners of his mouth curved up, his long and narrow eyes were filled with ridicule, that aloof and noble appearance, as if he was looking at a prey that was on the verge of death. This feeling caused Elder Helion to feel extremely uneasy. Beligaju's voice was still as deep and pleasant as usual. Elder Yun, do you really think that the Yaman's dungeon can lock me up? Upon hearing this, Helion Vivian turned to look at the man beside her. Needless to say, it definitely can't lock him up. Not to mention that His Highness was always interested in locks and chains, he even wanted a cage on the dragon bed in his palace. Even if he was not interested, he could break the iron door in front of him into pieces with a lift of his hand. Not to mention a lock. Therefore, on this day, it was very likely that a certain highness would open the lock on his own, and then use his superb qinggong to walk out of the dungeon for a walk without the slightest scruple. Then, he would return to the cell and lock himself up. Yes, this does seem like something he would do. The more Helion Vivian thought about it, the more she felt that it was possible. She took another look at Beligaju. Elder Helion wasn't a fool either. On the contrary, he was very clear about the terrifying extent of the third prince's martial qi that was standing before him. Not to mention the Yaman's dungeon, Even the world-famous Shaolin Temple's 18 bronze net formation could not trap this man who had conquered the entire empire many years ago. Thinking of this, Elder Hellion felt an inexplicable chill at the back of his neck. Since he could have walked out long ago, why did he have to wait until the yamen opened? Unless this was the moment he was waiting for. The answer that came out of nowhere made Elder Hellion's eyes shrink. Beligaju rubbed the silver ring on his index finger with a faint smile. I know very well when you came to the provincial capital and when you met Liao Qingtian. After all, every time Liao Qingtian interrogated me, he had to go somewhere else. So, you voluntarily went to prison not only to make Liao Qingtian die a horrible death, but also to make it easier to follow General Liao. It was too immoral. Hellion Vivian and He Eyes silently looked at each other. The only person who could be so shameless was probably His Highness. How tragic was Liao Qingtian? Until his death, he did not know that His Highness had followed him. That's why it's best not to play mind games with His Highness. You'll be ruined. Third brother, you're amazing. Little Seven had a domineering look on his little tiger face. He was always full of admiration for his third brother. This kind of people should be dealt with like this. Eunuch Sun began to consider whether he should raise the seventh prince separately from the royal family. After all, the seventh prince was too young. If he was raised astray at such a young age, it would be too worrisome. Although these two had never let him off easy, you personally told Liao Qingtian to get rid of all the people who had a grudge against Bayview Seafood Restaurant. That's why the murder in the Long Alley happened. Beligaju said slowly, you underestimate Our Lady Vivian. Do you think you can do whatever you want with her around? I'm actually being praised. Hellion Vivian glanced at Beligaju. As an arms tycoon, of course, she would not allow anyone to mess around. That's the standard. Beligaju looked at her proud little face. He held back the smile at the corner of his mouth and reached out to pull her over. At this moment, Elder Hellion's face had lost all color. This is royal family's words. It can't be used as evidence. It seems like Elder Hellion wants me to give you a quick death. Beligaju glanced sideways at Shadow who was standing behind him. This is the cup that you personally passed to Liao Qingtian when you just arrived at the provincial capital. Shadow was holding a transparent glass bottle in his hand. A red worm was lying quietly in the glass bottle. The worm was not big, but it looked extremely terrifying because of the two pincers in front of it. Beligaju smiled. I'll return it to you now. As he spoke, he uncorked the bottle with his slender fingers and poured the liquid on Elder Hellion's arm. Elder Hellion did not have time to react. The worm quickly drilled into his skin. No. Elder Hellion did not care about anything else. He pulled the attendant beside him and shouted in horror, hurry up and find Liao Qingtian's body. There's an antidote on him. Hurry up. However, it was too late. The worm crawled along the blood. Once it tasted the blood, its crawling speed would be even faster. The rumbling sounds made the scalps of all the officials go numb. In just a few seconds, Elder Hellion's gaze changed. He stared blankly in front of him and lost all consciousness. Beligaju asked calmly, who's the real boss behind Bayview Seafood Restaurant? It's me. Elder Hellion raised his head slowly. Boom. The yamen was in an uproar. When the officials heard the word me, they sat on the ground completely paralyzed. The situation could not be clearer. They were all done for. The retired emperor stood up and glanced at Beligaju. He announced in a deep voice, pass down my order. Hellion Yun massacred the people for his own selfish desires. He formed a clique and plotted to murder the crown prince. He should be punished according to his crime. From today onwards, thoroughly investigate the officials who are related to Bayview Seafood Restaurant. Find them all, regardless of whether they are from the provincial capital or the capital city. Yes. A clear voice resounded throughout the yamen. Eunuch Sun glanced at the officials on the ground. What about these people? Let third brother decide. The retired emperor was tired. It was not his body that was tired, but his heart. He had always known that there were problems in the empire ever since he abdicated. However, what made him disappointed was that a small Bayview seafood restaurant had implicated so many people. There were many things that he did not know about. The 4 influential families could not be left alive. If they were to stay, the empire would be destroyed. Eunuch's son naturally noticed the displeasure in the retired emperor's heart. He replied, yes. Then, he walked to Beligaju and whispered a few words. After Beligaju heard him, he glanced at him indifferently. What's the point of keeping people who don't even dare to testify? The meaning of this sentence was very clear. It was because they understood it too well. That was why those officials were so regretful that they wished they could go back in time. It turned out that they were the ones who were truly foolish. If they were like official Zhong, they would have stood up and said something when it was time to do so. At least they could have kept their lives. Now, they had no choice but to die. The Liao family, who had dominated the provincial capital for many years, finally came to an end. It was said that on the day these officials were beheaded, every family was so happy that they set off firecrackers. The merchants who wanted to thank Heli and Vivian lined up from the Yamen entrance to the end. Chapter 523. 2 of them were the ones that Heli and Vivian met in Bayview restaurant when she first came to the provincial capital. Heli and Vivian called them to the inner Yamen and asked Da Xiong to prepare tea for them. Little Seven sat beside Heli and Vivian and stared at the crabs in the hands of the 2 men. The 2 men were smart. Although they did not know Little Seven's identity, they untied one of the crabs and passed it to him when they saw the child's expression. Initially, they wanted to give it to the child to play with. After all, the crabs were still alive. Unexpectedly, the Little Seven Prince received it politely. After thanking them, he opened his mouth and took a bite. That's raw. The 2 men were stunned and quickly shouted, "You can't eat it." The Little Seventh Prince furrowed his pair of tiger-like eyebrows as he looked at the crab in his hand that was trembling in fear. After thinking for a while, he finally handed it over to Heli and Wei Wei and said, "Third aunt, let's steam it tonight. If we eat it like this, it doesn't taste as good." The 2 men's lips twitched. "This, taste is not the main point. How can one be enough for you?" Heli and Vivian took out her handkerchief and wiped the corner of the little one's mouth. "After I'm done with my work, I'll make 100 of them. 50 of them will be steamed and 50 of them will be stir-fried. I think you'll like it." The Little Seven Prince nodded. He was so obedient that it was unlike him. Eunuch's son was already in tears. So this was the ultimate move to deal with the 7th prince. He should have done the same thing when he was biting the goldfish. Heli and Vivian rubbed the little one's head and then looked into the eyes of the 2 men. "I invited the 2 of you here because I want to ask for your help. Lord Wei, you're too polite. If you have anything to say, just tell us." One of them was still as righteous as ever. "Lord Wei, you have helped us to vent our anger. Not only did you deal with those corrupt officials, you even shut down the Bayview seafood restaurant. That was simply too satisfying. Why are you still saying that you'll help us?" The other person didn't say anything. Instead, he reached out and tugged at his sleeve, as if saying something. That person turned around and raised his eyebrows in confusion. "Brother Wang, why do you keep pulling my sleeve? Didn't you hear that child call her 3rd sister-in-law?" The one surnamed Wang lowered his voice and his expression changed. "Is it really like what the villagers said? Lord Wei, she is a woman?" Heli and Vivian laughed. "I am indeed a woman, but this shouldn't affect our previous cooperation." "Of course it won't." The 2 of them answered in unison, but they were a little confused about Heli and Vivian's identity. "But, how can a woman be a superior?" Eunuch's son smiled and replied, "Since the princess consort wants to be, she's here to be. Princess." The 2 men were dumbfounded. After regaining their senses, they immediately knelt on the ground. This humble one has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. "I hope that the princess consort." Before they could finish, Heli and Vivian helped them up. "You don't have to do this." However, Brother Li was wrong just now. Bayview restaurant won't be closed. Won't be closed? The 2 of them frowned subconsciously. Why? Didn't we investigate it thoroughly? Why would we keep such a harmful restaurant? Heli and Vivian nodded and smiled. "Not only will it not be closed, I will make it bigger." "What do you mean?" Heli and Vivian played with the jade pendant in her hand. "From today onwards, I will officially take over Bayview Restaurant. After all, it's an old shop in the War Dragon Empire. Many merchants come to the provincial capital for Bayview Restaurant. The provincial capital is the only coastal city in the north. Most of the people rely on seafood for a living. Bayview Restaurant's closure may be satisfying, but in the long run, the disadvantages will outweigh the benefits. Without the restaurant's purchase, the people will not be able to sell their seafood at a good price. In the end, the people will be the ones to suffer. Little Vivian is so thoughtful. A slightly deep voice sounded from outside the door. The little seventh prince turned around, picked up the crab, and ran to the old man. Grandfather. The retired emperor patted his grandson's head. When he looked at Hellion Vivian, he showed an appreciative smile. Hellion Vivian also stood up. She was neither servile nor overbearing, but she showed respect to the old man. Grandfather, this is probably the reason why you didn't make the decision to close down Bayview Restaurant. Compared to grandfather's consideration for the country and the people, what I did is nothing. You little brat. The retired emperor laughed. Based on what you said, you should have a solution. Go ahead and do it. If you need the cooperation of any department, just mention it to me. Okay. Hellion Vivian responded with a smile. After so many things happened, the retired emperor was already busy. He would not stay here for long. After he finished giving instructions to Hellion Vivian, he returned to the capital city with eunuch Sunday. Hellion Vivian turned around and continued to talk to the two merchants. Both of you know about seafood and business. Are you willing to stay in the provincial capital and be the stewards of my reopening of Bayview Restaurant? Yes. We are willing. At that moment, the two merchants felt as if a pie had fallen from the sky and hit their heads. How could they not be willing? She was the boss of Profound Heaven, the person who created a miracle in the business world. In their line of work, being able to follow her was definitely a blessing of 3 lifetimes. Then let's start with the selection of seafood. Hellion Vivian's thin lips curled up. The Yarman will release an announcement at noon, asking all the fishermen to deliver their goods at the entrance of Bayview Restaurant. When the time comes, we will select the seafood on the spot. It must be big, fresh, and plump. Only then will the shrimp and crabs be delicious. No problem. Leave it to us. The two merchants were not the kind to drag their feet. They immediately went to prepare. At this moment, Hellion Vivian gave an order that puzzled everyone. Move the big iron pot used for cooking to the entrance of Bayview Restaurant. Prepare the chopping board and firewood, coarse ginger, garlic, salt, vinegar, and sugar. All the seasonings must not be left out. The most important thing is to get more chili and peanuts. Do it now, and do it quickly. Da Xiong and Chen Liang looked at each other and then said, yes. However, they kept muttering in their hearts. What was their boss going to do? Move the big iron pot to the entrance of the restaurant. Wasn't it just blocking the door? Would anyone still come to eat then? Chapter 524. At noon, the sun was shining brightly and the wind was blowing gently. The news of the reopening of Bayview Seafood Restaurant gave the people in the provincial capital an indescribable feeling. When Bayview Seafood Restaurant collapsed, they were happier than anyone else. The big bully in the provincial capital was finally eradicated. But now, someone said that it would reopen. Wouldn't the result be the same no matter who reopened it? By then, it would be another scammer. All the businessmen would be scared away and the provincial capital would never be able to develop. In the end, the ones who would not be able to live a good life would be the fishermen who relied on the land and the sea. However, what made them hesitate was that the new boss of Bayview Seafood Restaurant was buying seafood at a high price. Moreover, he was paying for the seafood at the entrance of Bayview Seafood Restaurant under the watchful eyes of the public. This was something that had never happened before. They had sent a lot of seafood to Bayview Seafood Restaurant, but they were never forced to buy it. Sometimes, when they finally got something good, a lobster that should be worth 5 taels of silver, the other party would only give them 1 tael of silver and send them away. It was because these things happened in the kitchen, and no one from the higher-ups cared about it. Now, they were paying for the seafood at a high price, Many people were tempted, but they did not dare to approach Bayview Seafood Restaurant because of its reputation. They could only look around at the entrance. On the second floor of the restaurant, Helene Vivian was drinking tea near the window. She was holding a porcelain cup in one hand and supporting her chin with the other. Her starry eyes were looking out of the window. "It's almost time," Helene Vivian said as she stood up and stretched lazily. "Take the pot and let's go out." Da Xiong and Chen Liang nodded. They walked over and wanted to carry the big iron pot out together. However, before they could bend down, the little one had already picked up the big iron pot with one hand. His little tiger face turned around and looked at them adorably with a meat bun in his mouth. Da Xiong and Chen Liang were speechless. "What are you waiting for?" Helene Vivian walked over and raised her eyebrows. Da Xiong immediately burst into tears. "Sob, sob, sob. Boss, we lost again. The Seventh Highness is clearly a baby who can't even walk properly. How can he have such great strength? How could they, 3-foot-tall men, survive?" It was a complete defeat. Hearing this, Helene Vivian smiled wickedly and comforted her two subordinates. "It's okay. He's still young. You're 15 years apart. No matter how outstanding he is, he won't come out and steal your girl." Da Xiong and Chen Liang were speechless. Why was it that the more boss spoke, the more they felt like they were failures in life? "Third sister-in-law, I've also helped you get the firewood over there." The little seventh prince was always full of vigor. He spoke like a calm little adult. Da Xiong and Chen Liang, "Your Highness, put it down. Let the two of us take the firewood." "Yes, let's do it. I can't continue to be so dispirited. I have to show my value." The little seventh prince calmed down and said with a domineering look in his eyes, "Then be careful, don't scatter third aunt's firewood." "No, how could we?" Clang. Da Xiong and Chen Liang looked at the firewood on the ground because of their tugging and were petrified. "So stupid." The little one glanced at the two of them and didn't say anything more. He straightened his body and straightened his legs. Using the tip of his foot, he picked up the firewood one by one and placed it on his shoulder. Then, he put the pile of firewood on his shoulder and carried it out just like that. Therefore, the scene that people saw was a little one walking in front with firewood on his left shoulder and an iron pot in his right hand. Behind him were two big men who didn't carry anything. Seeing this, Governor Chen pulled his son over. "Liang, how could you let the little seventh prince carry so many things by himself?" Chen Liang opened his mouth and wanted to explain. "Let's not talk about his identity. He's still a child. How did I teach you? You must know how to respect the old and love the young. You've disappointed me." Chen Liang didn't say a word. He felt that the gazes around were basically the same as his father's. They were all about crusading against him. "Little seventh prince, sob sob, please come and help me." The little seventh prince didn't have time to talk to him. He surrounded Helene Vivian and pointed at the crab. "Third sister-in-law, the crab that Grandpa is holding is big. It looks delicious." Helene Vivian followed his finger and looked over. She said faintly, "Grandpa, are you selling your crab?" Her tone was cold, but she didn't lose her manners. It was normal business and she wouldn't treat him differently because of the other party's identity. The grandpa didn't expect that the boss who reopened Bayview Seafood Restaurant was Lord Wei, who overthrew the Liao family. He felt more complicated and hesitant. Helene Vivian didn't force him. "Grandpa, you can think about it for a while." She turned around and whispered, "Da Xiong, Chen Liang, prepare the firewood and light the pot." Yes. This time, the two of them were very active. One of them was mainly responsible for isolating the little seventh prince. The other one was only responsible for preparing the firewood and lighting the pot. This time, they couldn't let the little seventh prince take away their jobs. Otherwise, they would definitely be spurned to death. As it turned out, Da Xiong and Chen Liang were thinking too much. The little seventh prince didn't have time to pay attention to them. He was staring at the crabs, shrimps, and seaweed with his big eyes. There were only two words in his mind. "Food, these are all food. Pack." The first piece of firewood was lit. Everyone looked over at Bayview Seafood Restaurant. Most of them were curious about why Hellion Vivian brought out a big pot. On the contrary, the two merchants from before looked at each other, then placed the wooden buckets in front of Hellion Wei. These are the freshest ones. There's a sea fish, 2 lobsters, and crabs. My lady, the situation is more complicated than we thought. The villagers aren't very willing to do this business because of the Bayview seafood restaurant incident. Yes, I can understand. Hellion Wei's tone was calm, as if she had already expected such a situation. Don't worry, someone will come to do business with us very soon. You guys put this barrel in front of the chopping board first. Yes. Everyone had something to do. Even the little 7th prince was squatting on the ground and watching the 2 crabs crawling around. At first, the shadows were worried that the little 7th prince would eat whatever he saw. Now that they saw this situation, they were relieved. Then, they knelt down on one knee and reported, "Master, everything is normal." In the opposite tea house, Bailey Jiaoju played with the porcelain cup in his hand. His black phoenix eyes slowly swept across the crowd below. The corners of his mouth curved up, and his voice imperceptibly revealed an air of nobility. She brought out all the pots and pans, and you call that normal? Chapter 525. This. The problem was that he didn't know what the princess was going to do. Just as An Ying was in a dilemma, there was a bang outside the window. 3 knives appeared in Hellion Vivian's hands. Each knife had a different shape, but they were all beautiful and eye-catching. She took one of the long knives and 3 wooden sticks. She sharpened one end and aligned the length of the stick. Then, she bent down and scooped up the fish from the wooden barrel. Her movements were very fast, and in a flash, she had already removed the scales from the lively fish. Compared to freshwater fish, this kind of fish had almost negligible bones. Its flesh was plump and delicious. But the prerequisite was that one had to be able to control its taste. Is Lord Wei cooking? Is he cooking by himself? She removed the scales so quickly. Wait a minute, why isn't the fish in the pot? Whoosh. Hellion Vivian indeed didn't put the fish in the pot. Instead, she quickly cut the fish and skewered it with the 3 wooden sticks. Then, she placed the fish on the fire. Hellion Vivian did these things very skillfully. It didn't look like it was her first time cooking. She held the brush in her left hand and dipped it in the sauce and sesame oil that she had prepared. Then, she brushed it over the fish. With a sizzling sound, a faint fishy fragrance wafted out. The commoners frowned. After all, eating seafood was about the original taste. Wouldn't it be a waste to roast such a good sea fish like this? Just as everyone was doubting, Hellion Vivian picked up the second knife. She chopped the scallions, ginger, and garlic into powder. Then, she added the celery and garlic sprouts. The oil in the pot was already heated. Once the food was added, it bloomed in the pot. In just an instant, a fragrance spread throughout the entire street. People couldn't help but take a deep breath. Originally, Hellion Vivian didn't do these things. It was just the simplest stir-frying steps. However, the key was in the last step. She added the peanuts and chili together. She quickly stir-fried them. A fragrant and spicy smell burst out in an instant. It made people want to smell it with all their might. After that, her movements were even faster. After stir-frying the celery and garlic sprouts, it was time to add the mushrooms. In ancient times, very few people would argue about which kinds of mushrooms were poisonous and which weren't. So when Hellion Vivian threw the mushrooms into the pot, everyone was shocked. But towards the end, when the unique smell of the shiitake mushroom assaulted their nostrils, they immediately felt a burst of hunger. The little girl was standing beside Hellion Vivian, standing on her tiptoes as she looked at the delicious dishes in the pot. She was almost drooling. Not to mention little Seven, even Chen Liang came over. "Boss, what are you making? It smells so good. Millimeter. I love the Duke brand of roasted fish." After Hellion Vivian finished speaking, she felt like she couldn't be any smarter. A domineering CEO's criteria for pursuing his wife was to be crazy, cool, and fucking awesome. Using his name to name something was not a big deal, only Love brand grilled fish. The little 7th prince scratched his bald head, and then raised his little face to look at the tea house opposite him. When Nying relayed this name, his heartbeat was more than 10 times faster than before. Hair. What he didn't expect was that His Highness actually smiled. And he even looked very handsome when he smiled. Was it because the name given by the princess was too stupid, so he smiled? Only loved you. Wei loved you, very good, she has finally improved. Beligaju picked up the teacup in his hand and looked sideways at the slender figure outside the window. The curve at the corner of his mouth was gentler than ever. However, at this moment, the people who were just standing outside the Bayview Seafood Restaurant to watch the show suddenly had the urge to taste the dishes in the pot. Hellion Vivian didn't stay idle. While the fish was still roasting, she picked up the third knife. She pressed her left hand on the back of the lobster and made a small opening in the middle. Then, she stuffed some chopped chicken meat into the opening and mixed it with shiitake mushrooms. After that, she smeared a thin layer of honey on the lobster and directly put it into the steamer basket to steam. Next, she took out the red cabbage from the pot and put it on a metal tray. Under the tray was a small charcoal stove with fruit wood. The fire was neither too big nor too small, it was just right. With this, the aroma just now became even more alluring. Some people couldn't wait to take a deep breath. I didn't expect Lord Wei to be so good at cooking. Just this aroma alone is enough to make people drool. Combining peanuts and chili together, it's amazing. I really want to have a bite. The last sentence was what everyone was thinking. Hellion Wei then brought 2 large crabs to the table. One was chopped into pieces and put into the pot with hot oil, while the other was steamed with scallions. The 2 fragrances intertwined together and continuously rushed into everyone's nose, stimulating everyone's taste buds. It smells so good. Even the 2 merchants who had been traveling around for many years couldn't help but ask curiously, what did Lord Wei add to it? It smells so good. Wild pepper. Hellion Vivian knew that until now, no one in the War Dragon Empire had used wild pepper to enhance the aroma, so she took out a star anise wild pepper and showed it to the 2 people. The 2 people had seen this kind of wild pepper before, but they had never taken it seriously. That was because the smell was too strong, so they thought it was nothing good. They didn't expect that it would smell so good after being mixed with meat. It was really amazing. The hot aroma rushed out. Hellion Vivian knew that the steamed lobsters were almost done. She used 2 bamboo chopsticks and scooped up the whole lobster. Then, she poured the sauce on top of the lobster and opened a bottle of wine she brewed herself. After pouring half a cup of wine into it, she closed the lid of the pot. Next was the steamed crab. It was very big. Ordinary steaming didn't seem to have any tricks, but at the beginning, she used the right amount of cooking wine and salt to get rid of the fishy smell, leaving only the freshness of the crab. It was paired with a stack of seafood soy sauce and a small stack of cold fungus. Little 7, leave half a portion. Let the villagers enjoy the rest. Hellion Vivian passed the big plate to the little one. The little one nodded very seriously. Then, he opened his mouth and picked up a crab leg. He pushed it in front of the old man and didn't say anything. He just looked up at the old man with his little face. It was impossible for anyone to refuse. The old man took the bamboo chopsticks and added a mouthful of crab meat. The fragrance left in his mouth made him open his eyes wide in an instant. Then, he ate a second mouthful. Hey, old man, you, don't eat by yourself. Hurry up and tell us, what is that taste? It's delicious. Especially this sauce, I have never eaten it before. It's too delicious. Old man Yu's words made the commoners even more curious. What would Lord Wei's next dish be? Because it was obvious that they couldn't touch the steamed crab anymore. Chapter 526. Whoosh. Following that, Hellion Vivian opened the lid of the pot that contained the lobsters. At this time, the red wine had already been mixed with soy sauce and honey, and it had been simmered into a very beautiful soup. The golden lobster was lying on top of the soup, and it was very tasty. Other than the intoxicating aroma, no one could smell anything else. In addition, they had never seen such a cooking method before, so they were even more curious about what it would taste like. As usual, Hellion Vivian kept half of the soup and gave the other half to the commoners. Beligaju narrowed his eyes and played with the porcelain cup in his hand. His voice was still as elegant as jade. Stop the next dish. Don't let me see her cooking for others. Yes. Shadow lowered his eyes and thought to himself, His Highness is becoming more and more possessive. Sigh, I really don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. Outside the window, the commoners had already obtained one of the lobsters. They cut it open from the back, and the fragrant smell of fresh lobsters instantly filled the air. In addition, there were shiitake mushrooms wrapped in it, which made the smell even more layered. Almost impatiently, someone picked up a piece of lobster meat and put it into his mouth. The fragrance spread through his teeth. The shiitake mushrooms and chicken were very fresh, and when paired with the lobster meat and vegetable juice, it was simply too delicious. I have never eaten lobster like this before. My tongue is about to melt. What did Lord Wei put in the lobster just now? I don't know, I have no clue at all. Master Liu, you are a chef, please try again. What did you put in the lobster? How can it be so delicious? The master surnamed Liu was an experienced chef, and he was also a master at cooking seafood, but he had never eaten anything like this before. After all, what they valued the most was the sauce that was dipped in the lobster. To them, if they steamed the lobster until it was tender and delicious, and then mixed the sauce well, they could be considered a good chef who cooked seafood. And Lord Wei's method had clearly overturned his understanding of how to cook seafood. When he tasted the lobster meat, there was actually a sweet aftertaste. Did he put sugar in this? No, that's not right. Sugar can't have this effect because if I didn't taste it carefully, I wouldn't be able to taste the slight sweetness. This is a bit like honey. That's right, honey. Master Liu shook his head and said with admiration, I didn't expect Lord Wei to put honey in the seasoning. What else is there besides honey? People were curious. After eating the prawn meat, they all wanted to go home and make a plate. Master Liu tilted his head and pondered, there is indeed another smell in here, but even an old man like me can't guess what it is. The fragrance is too mysterious. Look over there. Lord Wei is going to remove the grilled fish. Hearing this, all the citizens turned to look at Hellion Vivian. In the beginning, they thought that grilled fish was not something that could be considered elegant. However, when Hellion Vivian placed the entire fish on the iron plate that was previously handcuffed, she poured in the side dishes mixed with chili oil. Then, she casually sprinkled peanuts and chopped green onions on the plate. It was a beautiful sight to behold. The sea fish had already been roasted to the point of dripping with oil. When it was placed on the iron plate, it would make a sizzling sound. The aroma was fully evaporated at that moment. The fish was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. There was no need to eat it. Just by looking at the color on the outside, one could tell that the taste was about right. Because it was really too fragrant. If the previous two dishes were said to make people drool, then this one was said to be very fragrant. Then this fragrance was enough to make people salivate. The citizens licked their lips and waited for the first taste. However, they were stopped by a man in black. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. An Ying? An Ying lowered his voice. Princess, His Highness is in the tea house opposite. He ordered this subordinate to stop your dish and let him eat it alone. After hearing An Ying's words, Hellion Vivian smiled. Sure enough, the novel was right. As long as you used his name, he would throw himself into your arms. Since His Highness wants to eat it, you can bring it to him. Hellion Vivian smiled faintly. Anyway, this side was almost done. If all the surprises were used up, it would lose the sense of mystery. The more you want to eat something, the more you want to eat it if you don't get to eat it. From a business point of view, it was best to stop now. When the citizens saw that the sea fish was not going to be tasted, they were disappointed. Hellion Vivian wiped her hands with a white handkerchief and changed the topic. Those who didn't get to eat it, don't feel sorry. From today onwards, this dish will appear on the menu of Bayview Restaurant. When the merchants heard this, they became interested. This smell is really unforgettable. Lord Wei, when will we be able to eat it again? Don't tell me that what we see is different from what we eat. When this question was asked, the people who were eating excitedly calmed down a little. The atmosphere was more or less stagnant. Helene Vivian's expression did not change at all. She was still smiling faintly and slowly answered, "Don't worry about this. In the past, the ingredients used in Bayview Restaurant were not fresh or were used to deceive everyone. In the future, the chef of Bayview Restaurant will be standing at the entrance so that the merchants can see the chef using the ingredients on the spot." After hearing this, the two merchants standing behind Helene Vivian looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with admiration for Helene Vivian. Placing the kitchen stove at the entrance and making the food transparent. This alone was the first in the country. It was definitely a hot topic and a selling point. Not only could it wash away the bad reputation of Bayview Restaurant, but it could also attract people from all over the country. In addition, the location of Bayview Restaurant could be seen as soon as one entered the provincial capital. Placing the kitchen stove at the entrance had a very good publicity effect. When it was time to eat, the aroma would be enticing. It would be difficult for them not to make money. They finally understood why Profound Heavens could become so famous in just a month. Other than the fact that the martial arts there were indeed good, the more important reason was that its boss was too good at creating hype. Every step she took was unexpected and pleasantly surprising. It was obvious that Helene Wei's words had moved the merchants. Initially, they came to the provincial capital to try the seafood from Bayview Seafood Restaurant. If the seafood was good, they would bring some back to their hometown. However, they had been here for quite some time now, and all they heard was that Bayview Seafood Restaurant was scamming them. They would often replace the lobsters they were looking for with small shrimps. The difference was so huge that they were basically bullying foreigners like them. Now, they did not have to worry about this problem anymore. They could get whatever they wanted on the spot and they could rest assured. But how about the price? Someone mustered up the courage and asked, "Is it going to be a scamming price again?" Chapter 527. Helene Vivian turned around and looked at her. "Auntie, how much do you think the lobster that I just cooked costs?" "About 5 taels of silver per lobster." The auntie was a little scared after asking, so her voice became weaker. Helene Vivian smiled faintly and said, "My fellow villagers are all seasoned fishermen, so they are more familiar with the price of seafood in the provincial capital than me. I won't lie to my fellow villagers. In the future, every dish in Bayview Restaurant will cost 3 times more than the purchase price." 3 times? Isn't that 12 or 13 taels of silver? The auntie calculated. Although she still felt that it was expensive, it was much less compared to the sky-high price of Bayview Restaurant in the past. In the past, it would be unreasonable for Bayview Restaurant to not extort more than 100 taels of silver for such a big fish. Lord Wei's price is reasonable. The old chef with the surname Liu opened his mouth again. In the restaurant business, the price is usually this much more than the purchase price. Some of them are even more expensive. Lord Wei's price is already considered cheap. Moreover, the taste of the lobster just now is something that even the best chefs in the capital can't cook. I don't dare to say anything about the reopening of Bayview Restaurant, but this dish is really worth it. That's right. I agree with Master Liu. Auntie Zhong, you are too stingy. Isn't it normal to sell a lobster for 13 taels of silver? Don't tell me that you want Liao to pay you another 100 taels of silver. You should be honest. The auntie shifted her gaze and said, "I didn't say much. I just wanted to know. Moreover, it is 3 times more than the purchase price." Helene Vivian looked at the auntie indifferently. She knew that there were many kinds of people. In the countryside, most of them bullied the weak and feared the strong. She was not a saint. She would not treat the other party differently because of their status. "Auntie, you don't have to come if you don't think it is worth it." Helene Vivian's tone was very indifferent. However, the auntie's expression suddenly changed. She did not say that she did not want to eat. Didn't she say that Lord Wei was kind and considerate? Why didn't he follow her instructions and lower the price? "The price won't change. I have my own rules." Helene Vivian looked straight at the crowd and said, "In the future, when this Bayview Seafood Restaurant grows bigger, the dishes will be more complete. I welcome all of you to eat here, and I won't force you if you don't come." Hearing this, the merchants laughed. That's how business should be. The rules can't be changed. We can rest assured now that Bayview Seafood Restaurant is in Sir Wei's hands. In the future, we hope that Sir Wei will take care of our business. Let's take care of each other. Helene Vivian still had a faint smile on her face. She was polite from beginning to end. The merchants began to admire this young Lord Wei more and more. Not only did he become a magistrate at such a young age, he even defeated the local tyrant. Now that he had reopened Bayview Seafood Restaurant, his magnanimity was truly admirable. At that moment, they decided to immediately start selling 100 crabs. They wanted the ones that smelled like Bayview Seafood Restaurant. Helene Vivian tilted her head and instructed, "Steward Zhu, bring this gentleman to register. There will be many things to work with in the future." Yes. The two merchants who followed Helene Vivian earlier were excited. 100 crabs were sold on the first day of the restaurant's opening. Only the boss of Profound Heavens could do such a thing. It was no wonder that people said that if one had such a good boss, one would be able to live a prosperous life. The commoners could only watch as the businessmen entered the Bayview Seafood Restaurant. They could not sell any of the seafood they had. It was an indescribable feeling in their hearts. At this moment, Helene Vivian spoke again. "This time, when Bayview Seafood Restaurant reopens, 4 more ponds will be built outside the restaurant. They will be used to purchase the seafood caught by the common people." When the common people heard this news, they were overjoyed. "Sir Wei, look at my crab. I just caught it today. It's still moving. Sir Wei, there's mine too. How much is this seafood worth? Just give me whatever you want." The crowd scrambled to squeeze over. Their enthusiasm had reached its peak. Helene Vivian smiled faintly. "Don't worry, everyone. Stand in a line and take your time. The steward will arrange the purchase. As long as the seafood provided by the common people is good enough and big enough, we will be able to get a good price." When Auntie Zhong, who was nitpicking just now, heard this, she pushed the people around her aside with brute force. She did not care if the person she pushed was an old man. She leaned in front of Helene Vivian and said, "Sir Wei, please accept mine first. I have a lot of seafood. They are big and cheap. If you don't believe me, I can take them out for you to see." Helene Vivian glanced at her slowly and said, "Go to the back and line up." That one glance was enough to make the woman freeze on the spot. That was because there was no warmth in that gaze. "If anyone doesn't line up in the future, don't ever buy their seafood," Helene Vivian said to the steward. The steward also glanced at Auntie Zhong and bowed his head respectfully. Yes. Auntie Zhong was used to being unreasonable. Now that she was scolded by Helene Vivian in front of the crowd, she could only feel her face turning red. She wanted to find a hole to hide in. This time, she finally calmed down. With her tail between her legs, she started to line up in an orderly manner. Bayview Seafood Restaurant reopened this time. Firstly, there was no firecrackers, and secondly, there was no lottery. However, it was much more grand than before. Everyone knew about it. Once they bought the seafood, they would be able to sell it immediately. Even the people in the capital did not hesitate to send people to look for a wonderful dish called drunken lobster in red wine after hearing about it. Not to mention the dishes like spicy diagonal crab and stir-fried scallops, they were even famous in the provincial capital. Slowly, it started to spread to the whole country. All of this happened in just 3 days. In just 3 days, Bayview Seafood Restaurant changed from a restaurant that was famous for its scams to the #1 seafood restaurant where customers had to line up for their meals. It stirred up a storm in the world. People could not help but be curious. Who was this Lord Wei? How could he have such means? They all ran to the provincial capital's yamen to see Lord Wei's face. However, by the time they arrived, the provincial capital yamen had already been replaced with a new magistrate. The legendary Lord Wei seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Only the existence of the Bayview Seafood Restaurant could prove that this person had indeed been to the provincial capital. "Your Highness, Princess, if we continue forward, we will enter the hinterland of the capital. It's not convenient for me to bring my soldiers there. Jiang Liuyun sat on the back of the horse and cupped his hands toward Beligaju and Helian Vivian. I've escorted your highness and princess here. The retired emperor said that the line in the provincial capital has been removed. The people in the capital will be anxious. Your highness and princess, please be careful along the way. Chapter 528. Helian Vivian nodded, indicating that she understood. Her and Beligaju's actions would probably affect a lot of benefits. It was normal for the remaining elders to not be able to sit still. However, she did not know what kind of tricks they would play. At night, in the bamboo forest, a man in a long robe stood against the light, holding an ancient scroll in his fair hand. Master. The black shadow landed and knelt down on one knee. We have found Helian Vivian's whereabouts. She is indeed not in the palace, but has just entered the capital city. As for her whereabouts, I am still investigating. The man looked back and coughed softly. His voice was as clear as a jade plate. There is no need for that. If she has just entered the capital city, then it is very likely. What is very likely? The black shadow did not understand at all. The man continued, in less than 10 days, from Fuping County to the provincial capital, all the forces in the west of the capital city have been uprooted by someone with the surname Wei. Coincidentally, she has just returned from outside. Haha, what a good move. Master, are you saying that the person with the surname Wei is Helian Vivian? The black shadow was anxious. Does that mean that the thing we buried in the palace is useless? The man withdrew his gaze and said calmly, it is not useless. Didn't the south study room cause quite a stir? Soon, even the person in the palace will become one of our people. Crack. The incense in the stove burned out. The main hall of the palace was still as magnificent as ever. The carved pillars, fine silk curtains, and layers of golden silkworm silk shrouded the world behind, making it look like a fairyland. Outside the imperial palace, the water in the imperial river was slowly undergoing a tremendous change. A trace of red blood rose from the bottom of the water. There was a branch of the imperial river hidden in the flowers, and the trickling water was supposed to be so clear. Unbeknownst to others, some blood flowed out. The source could not be found. Thick blood flowed out from the beginning of the river, dyeing the clear water red. The smell of the blood was fresh, as if it was floating in the air, like a sweet song. Crack. The wheels ran over the wood. When Helian Vivian woke up from her nightmare, the carriage had already entered the capital city. Bailey Jiaoju sat beside her and reached out his hand to hold her face. He wiped the sweat on her forehead with his fingertips. His long eyebrows were slightly furrowed and his tone was very indifferent. Are you still unwilling to tell me what you dreamed of? I really don't remember this time. Helian Vivian was telling the truth. She had no recollection of it, only a vague feeling. As soon as she arrived at the capital city, the nightmare. Should she check if the capital city's feng shui was suitable for her? You don't have to look. The feng shui in Beijing is very good. It's just that the qi here isn't quite right. Yuan Ming didn't expect that in just 10 days after they left the capital, the qi here would become like this. When they were in school, they were the effects of the capital's a city. If the peaceful feng shui was destroyed, then there was a high possibility that demons would take advantage of the situation to invade. That shouldn't be the case. There are so many people in the capital city. The yang qi should be flourishing. How could it become so muddy? Yuan Ming was still talking to himself, which was unusual. Helian Vivian narrowed her eyes. It seemed that the capital city's weather was about to change. Boom. Thunder rumbled. The autumn rain in the north came down very quickly. After it was over, it was a little cold. The rain washed everything away. At the very least, nothing could be seen in the imperial palace. The imperial father was called to the front of the palace. He had to be present to punish Elder Helian. The retired emperor knew this better than anyone else. Helian Vivian did not go with Beligaju. Instead, she took off her cloth clothes and changed back to her usual clothes. She stood in front of the Defense Division's residence with only the little 7th Prince by her side. However, the little 7th Prince alone was enough to fight against more than 100 guards. Third sister-in-law, are we eating here today? The little seventh prince was still carrying the local specialty he brought back from the provincial capital, a big crab. Along the way, the crab stretched out its pincers. If an ordinary person saw it, they would definitely bite someone. The little seventh prince lowered his head and gave the crab a bite. The crab was immediately scared by the bite. A person who scared the crab with a bite. The shadows raised their heads and looked at the sky silently for a while. In this world, only their little master could do that. With such a miraculous ability, he could indeed accompany the princess consort in alone. If there was no other way, he could give a bite to each of the stewards. Helene Vivian held the little one's hand and walked into the residence. With every step she took, the image of her being chased out of this place became clearer. And now, she was finally back. Helene Vivian took a deep breath and clenched her fists that were hidden under her long sleeves. She walked up the stairs with her long legs. Behind her was the setting sun. The combination of light and shadow created an indescribably beautiful scene. What was meant to come had finally come. There were a total of 49 stewards in the Helene family, and 41 of them came. They came to propose the removal of the successor. When they looked at Helene Vivian, there was a bit of disdain. The royal family always did things flawlessly, so even until now, the stewards in the Helene family did not know that the Lord Wei that they often heard these days was Helene Vivian. They thought that Helene Vivian was just a poor princess consort in name. That was why they all sat here and asked Helene Vivian to give up her seat. Those without merit did not have the qualifications to be the true successor of the Helene family. This was what the Helene old man said when he was alive, and it was also one of the rules of the Helene family. As long as more than 40 stewards jointly wrote a letter, it would be effective. Someone knocked the pipe in his hand on the table and said, "Eldest young miss, you really made us wait for a long time." "Ah, Brother Guer, since eldest young miss is here, let's not talk nonsense. Let's quickly tell eldest young miss our intentions and let her voluntarily give up her seat so that both sides can see each other. Brother Li is right. Eldest young miss, you should understand the rules of the family. Although you are now the princess consort of the imperial family, the rules cannot be broken. This subordinate advises eldest young miss to hand over her authority properly, so that everyone will not be embarrassed." Helene Wei didn't say anything at first. Instead, she walked to the main seat and crossed her slender legs. Her left hand, which was clasped with a silver ring, lazily supported her chin. She was overflowing with mischief. "What did you guys just say? Give up my seat." Chapter 529. This is also a foolproof plan that we came up with. After all, we can't put our lives in the hands of a clan leader without any achievements. Don't you think so, everyone? The person holding the pipe stood up and turned around to look at the stewards. Immediately, there was a response. "Manager, you is right. There are more than 100 females in the Helene clan, not to mention there are also males in the periphery. If there isn't a person who can shoulder the burden as the clan leader, who will be able to protect the Helene clan when there is trouble in the future?" Helene Vivian listened to the people below as she played with the jade pendant on her waist. Her voice was calm. "Little Seven, throw steward you out." Little Seven, who was nibbling on a crab, looked up and responded, "Yes." Her small body flew out. Without even looking, she raised her hand and threw steward you behind her. It was no different from throwing trash. Only a bang was heard. The pipe rolled on the ground. Steward Yu was thrown out of the door and heavily hit the door frame. Pu. Blood fell to the ground. The stewards didn't have time to stop her. They stood up angrily. "Eldest young miss, are you trying to break the rules of the clan by doing this?" Steward Yu only said a few words and eldest young miss dealt such a heavy hand. "You're really too much. It's a well-known fact that you don't have any achievements. Don't tell me that no one is allowed to say it." The stewards looked at each other. They couldn't wait for Helene Vivian to get angry. As long as she got angry, they would have an excuse to remove her from her position. Although Elder Yoon was no longer around, the other 3 elders had already sent people over to remind them that the rules of etiquette of the major clans could not be broken. If it was broken, they would naturally find the emperor to reason with. Therefore, with the support of the three elders, what were they afraid of? If they didn't pull Hellion Vivian down, they would be the unlucky ones in the future. They must get rid of her before she fully rises. Hellion Vivian looked up and looked at the stewards who were speaking one after another. The corner of her mouth slightly curved. Who said that I don't have any achievements? Hearing this rhetorical question, all the stewards were stunned, and the people who were talking were also speechless. The air in the hall seemed to freeze all of a sudden. Everyone slowly turned to look at Hellion Vivian. Da Xiong, recite the imperial edict that the retired emperor gave the stewards as soon as I returned to the capital. In contrast to the stewards' restlessness, Hellion Vivian sat leisurely on the wooden chair from beginning to end. She played with the jade pendant on her waist with a faint smile on her face, as if she was in control of the entire situation. Yes. Da Xiong stretched out his left hand, revealing a golden imperial edict. Hellion Vivian, by my order, personally went to Fuping and changed her name to Wei Wei. She eradicated the corrupt officials and solved the drought with wisdom. She has made countless contributions. In the future, she will be rewarded with merits and can enjoy the treatment of a first-rank official. What? Wei Wei, Wei Wei. The stewards took a step back dispiritedly and fell back into their wooden chairs. Many people's expressions began to change drastically, and the teacups in their hands began to tremble. How could she be that Wei Wei? In other words, Elder Yun was originally eliminated by her? The stewards' hearts trembled, and their eyes shook violently. Since when did this little girl, whom they had always looked down upon, first open a world-renowned trading company, then invite back the hidden army, and now, even Elder Yun was dragged down by her? What was she trying to do? What was she trying to do? Hellion Vivian stood up with a smile. It seems that all the stewards have heard it clearly. It's time for me to speak, Steward Li. I am here. Steward Li trembled as he knelt down. Hellion Vivian walked over. My grandfather treated you well when he was alive, but you were the first to support Hellion Guangyaro when he came out to seize power. Steward Li could no longer speak clearly. Hellion Vivian did not intend to listen to what he had to say. Her long sleeves fluttered in the wind. Men, drag him down. Doesn't he like to show off his power and money? Let Steward Li have a taste of what it feels like to be smashed to death by money. Yes. Da Xiong lowered his eyes and accepted the order. Hellion Vivian wiped her hands. Bring Steward Yu along as well. These two are jackals of the same tribe. Yes. Out of the 8 stewards, 2 were sentenced to death in an instant. The remaining 33 stewards who followed the trend scrambled to their knees. Eldest Miss, please spare our lives. I'm afraid of dirtying my hands by killing all of you. Hellion Vivian glanced at them indifferently. All of you have not done anything excessive to my grandfather. You are just a bunch of cowards. I don't want to take your lives. From now on, hand over all of your assets and properties and get out of the capital. Don't let me see you again. This time, I don't want your lives, but it doesn't mean that I won't kill you if I see you again. Get out. The 33 stewards looked at each other. In terms of martial arts, Eldest Miss already had the hidden army. Although they had never seen the hidden army in action, they knew how powerful the hidden army was in the past. It was definitely not an exaggeration to scare them. In terms of martial arts, they had already lost. In terms of literature, just the name Wei Wei showed that they had already lost. Thinking of this, they did not dare to hesitate and immediately got out of the general's residence. Hellion Vivian looked at the remaining 6 stewards who were trembling in fear and smiled. Back then, all of you betrayed my grandfather and joined Elder Yun's side, helping Hellion Guangyaro to rise to power. Now that you see my current appearance, are you thinking about how I should deal with all of you? Eldest Miss, you can't. Slap. Hellion Vivian slapped him, her eyes cold. What can't I do? Since I can touch the Empress, touch Prime Minister Su, remove Hellion Guangyaro, and push Elder Yun into prison, I can naturally do the same to all of you. Da Xiong, take all of them away. The Hellion clan does not need stewards who forget righteousness at the sight of profit. Eldest Miss, One of the stewards pulled on Hellion Vivian's trousers. I have something to say. Hellion Vivian looked at him condescendingly. You have something to say? What do you want to say? The Hellion clan has a lot of assets. Eldest Miss, if you kill all of us, there will be no one to manage the Hellion clan. How can we bring glory to the clan? Eldest Miss, do you really want to kill all of us just for your own selfish desires? Hellion Vivian reached out and grabbed him by the collar. Back then, when my mother was seriously ill in bed, didn't all of you pressure her step by step? Not only did you give Hellion Guang Yarrow supreme power, you even helped the Su family to slander my mother and let her die in humiliation. Do you think that I, Hellion Vivian, can't handle the general's residence without all of you? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.